You guys know I don't mess around when it comes to teen drama. Uh, if there's one thing I care about most, it's not film, okay? It's not dance, it's not music, it's teen drama. Teen drama is my favorite thing on the planet. I take my teen drama very seriously. I love it. I love it. So when I tell you that the first season of Gossip Girl is perfect, and I loved every single second of it, I hope you take me extremely seriously. I love every single thing about this. Oh my God. I'm gonna try not to get overexcited, but if I were asked to design what I would consider to be like the perfect teen drama, it would basically be Gossip Girl, which isn't to say that it's perfect, but it's everything that I want from the form. I think it's brilliant. I think it's flawless. I know we're only one season in, but this stands a shot at being the best. I may reach the apex with Gossip Girl. Maybe better than any of the other shows we've covered. It has that sort of promise. I think it has the potential to be better than Dawson's Creek, better than Buffy the Vampire Slayer, better than Veronica Mars, better than One Tree Hill, better than My So-Called Life, better than the Gilmore Girls, and better than the OC. And I think the OC is a pretty apt place to start. The OC is a show that we've covered extensively on this channel, and I enjoyed about half of it. In fact, I enjoyed the second season a lot. I thought it was tremendous, especially with the inclusion of Ryan's brother, Trey Atwood, played by Logan Marshall Green. It was fascinating. And Josh Schwartz really impressed me in the first two seasons of the OC. Really impressed me. Little did I know that Josh Schwartz is also the showrunner, developer, creator of Gossip Girl. It's based on a novel, a popular series of novels. Josh Schwartz said he didn't want to jump right into another teen drama directly after the OC was canceled, but there was something almost gravitational that pulled him closer and closer to Gossip Girl, along with Stephanie Savage as the co-showrunner and co-creator. In its briefest explanation, Gossip Girl follows the lives of ultra-privileged kids in New York City. Um, from the Upper East Side, a place of old money, money that has been within these families for hundreds of years, possibly. So far as American history goes, it's ancient in our terminologies. The OC and Gossip Girl are pretty similar, um, thematically, meaning I think that Josh Schwartz was experimenting with caste systems, with class stratification, with the existence, even the possibility of young, tender, nervous, awkward, and real love between teenagers, um, within the nihilistic ethos that is the ultra-modern world. But Gossip Girl is so good that it makes the OC look like a warm-up. You know, it made it look like it was Josh Schwartz stretching his legs before running the teen drama marathon. The starting with the pilot, I was floored. I wish you could have seen me watch, because I've never watched Gossip Girl before. I should say that this is a first watch entirely. I've never watched Gossip Girl before. I had heard of it, but I want to say this was just after my time when it was on air. This came out in like 2008. I graduated high school in 2008. I was just out of the loop for this one, and I regret that entirely. I wish you could have seen me watch it. Watch these episodes. Like, I must have looked psychotic, positively mad, because I would be, like, clapping, like, so much, bravo at the fucking composition, bravo at the show's design. I was laughing, I was gasping, there wasn't an idle moment. This is everything I want from the forms. This is everything I want the form to represent. Yes, there's class and social stratification. Yes, there are beautiful people. And yes, there are these postmodern elements, this postmodern momentum, actually, that is propelling these characters into the areas of narrative that hadn't been previously unexplored by the popular domain of culture. And there's no better place to start than at the top. I always find stories of of the ultra rich to be the most fascinating when it comes to coming of age stories. I just covered Gilmore Girls, and I remember saying that I loved the stuff at Chilton the most because I thought characters like Paris Geller and Tristan Dugray had the most to offer me, like, intellectually and within a postmodern context, but also within an emotional one. I thought the stakes were a lot higher. They were playing for keeps, that it was a world that I thought, lent itself to the theatricality of teen drama, to the exaggerated components of teen drama emotionality. So I love the stuff at Chilton and Gilmore Girls the most, and basically this is a show that takes place, you know, at an elite private school in the richest part of New York City. Our exorbitantly wealthy characters far outnumber our average ones. And they're a lot more interesting. But it should be said that I don't hate any of the six main kids. I love them all. I think they're great characters. I think they're fantastic. I do have my favorites. Two favorites. And one of them, I think, is currently one of the most fascinating characters I have ever seen in a teen drama. His name is Chuck Bass. Let's talk a bit about Chuck, shall we? Originally, Chuck Bass was conceived as a recurring or a guest character. He was supposed to reach the apex of his character during the pilot as the villain of it, considering in that first episode he sexually assaults two different women. One of them looks like a child. You couldn't start more evil than that. In fact, I heard the showrunner, Josh Schwartz, talking about the character after they decided to keep him on, because there was something compelling about Ed Westwick's characterization of Chuck Bass. Josh Schwartz really nailed it. He said that Chuck Bass is a throwback to the 80s nihilistic teen villains of James Spader. He described Chuck Bass as, like, totally evil. That's a quote. That makes sense, but you did it better. He's one of the best characters, the most fascinating character I've ever seen in a teen drama. This is a character out of my fucking dreams. Like, this is perfect. His primary love interest is Blair Waldorf, who um is my other favorite character. I thought Chuck was just a little bit more compelling, more more fascinating than Blair was, but not by much. And I have never felt more bisexual in my entire life than when I've watched Blair Waldorf and Chuck Bass make out with each other. I'm parched. But I'm trying to say something kind of profound about the show's design, about the narrative. What I'm trying to say is this, it's an expertly designed season of television, and it hits all the marks that it's supposed to until till the characters, their behavior kind of changes in the season finale, and they act outside of the standard narrative. And all throughout the season, people like Chuck Bass are saying, like his friend Nate is lamenting, "Don't you think that our lives are planned out? Don't you think that the narrative has already been written?" And Chuck Bass has said yes, and there are plenty of amazing things within that narrative, but happiness isn't on the menu. Happiness is not within the narrative. And Chuck Bass is fine with that kind of nihilistic give and take. He's fine with the hedonism. in exchange for his soul, which is a huge price to pay at such a young age. And these kids all seem much older beyond their years, but that is what exorbitant wealth and privilege does. It creates these figureheads, these paragons of upper crust, ultra rich virtue and appeal. And through these kids and the high stakes at which they play, in which they plan and scheme to ruin each other, that's a microcosm of the power plays that their parents pursue, that the people who run our worlds do. They always play for keeps, and someone always loses, and there's always a war going on. The season is incredibly designed. Every character completes their arc, and it feels like they're back in the same place. Yet they have changed, right? Serena has gone through an entire arc, a healing sort of arc. She's recovered from trauma, from secrecy, from a sin that she is continually punishing herself for. Nate has gone through an incredible arc at kind of taking control of his life, or at least realizing that no one is in control of it. No one's in control of their life. Your father has a drug problem. Your mother is running away. You have more control than even than the people that you perceive as your controllers do, as the people who dominate you do. No one can dominate you but yourself. Or even then, I think it's a more of a nihilistic sense of freedom for Nate. I think that Nate, by the end of this season, has realized no one has a choice. Not really. So don't dwell, don't brood perpetually. Happiness could be on the menu if you prepare it correctly, if you order it, if you're actually hungry for it. Blair has a pretty incredible arc as well, in which she becomes a little bit more liberated because these kids also live in a restricted kind of way. They seem to be kids who have the world at their fingertips, but there is a limited expression applied to that. They can't step too far out of their social graces, out of the etiquettes, out of the roles of out of the social politics. They can't step too far outside of it. They can't go against the code. They have to follow the rules of the game. So it is pretty limited. It is pretty restrictive. But Blair seems to be able to liberate herself in a way that feels genuine, and it's something that she probably was repressing because she says that she brings out the best of Chuck, and Chuck brings out the worst in her, but it's a very good thing. And then we get to Chuck, which is why it gets very fascinating. Yes, he is a throwback to the 80s nihilistic teen villains of James Spader, like Totally Evil, like Pure Evil. Sure, yes. Um, he falls in love with Blair Waldorf, but he does a lot of unforgivable things all throughout it. But he is so cinematic. He looks incredible. He has the most physical poetry out of anybody in the cast. There's a lot of applied meaning. There's a lot of meaning within everything that Chuck Bass does. And since it's coming from a place of pure nihilism, you know that that meaning is also torturing him because he is the king of the meaningless. He is the prince of a meaningless empire. And yet, he's found himself feeling something, feeling love for Blair, and that terrifies him. In the season finale, he seems happy to go with her to Tuscany on this romantic getaway. And his father, and I actually can't tell if his father is trying to be kind or if his father is trying to keep his son in the arrested development of chaotic and evil nihilism. Because he seems to be speaking over his shoulder in a way that could be perceived as kind, and it probably should be, but I the parents are deeply manipulative here. A lot of them are. And he is speaking to his son and saying, everything's going to change. You have a real girlfriend now. It'll teach you about responsibility, growth, about maturity. You'll come back from Europe a new man. There's nothing you can do about it. You will change and you will grow. And you can see on Chuck's face, no. Chuck has approached a character arc. Chuck has become the reformed, lovesick hero? That's not Chuck Bass. So Chuck takes the bouquet of flowers that he's prepared to give Blair when he meets her at like his private jet's gonna take them there or something. Something absurdly something absurd like that. And you see him throw it in the trash and he keeps one rose for the cute, slutty blonde who just appeared in his room. I mean, he basically sleeps with her, or he does sleep with her. That's exactly what he does. But what he does is far more interesting, is he rejects the narrative. He feels the arc coming. We all see the arc coming. This is where the arc is supposed to be. And Chuck sees the change and rejects it, recoils from it, and just in one fluid motion, like that of a dancer, because the actor and the character is written in a way that is that's beyond graceful. It's beyond graceful. It's on another level. He makes nihilism the most beautiful ballet that you could possibly imagine. So when he's doing these motions, it's fluid and he turns and he's back to the pilot. All of that change is now buried inside of him. And he's back to being pure evil. Josh Schwartz had characters reject the narrative on the OC, but never this effortlessly and never this deliberately. Chuck Bass saw his arc, and Chuck Bass refused to embrace it. And I applauded him for that. I do love Chuck and Blair together, but I kind of love the carnage that they can wreak, the havoc that they cause. I love how mean and awful and evil they can be. I love how cruel they are together. And it doesn't matter who you are, you don't fuck with Blair Waldorf. Hell hath no fury, like a Chuck Bass scorned. I'm more afraid of Blair, to tell you the truth. Blair's an incredible character. She's unbelievably sexy. Oh my God, she's unbelievable to look at. But even more fun to watch because she is just. I was about to say just like Chuck, but Chuck. Blair has a moral compass. She does. She doesn't necessarily follow it, or it's damaged for sure, but Chuck doesn't believe in the concept of morality at all. He does not have one whatsoever. It's a non-issue with Chuck. Blair knows what's right and what's wrong, but she also knows what she has to do within the constant warfare of ultra-rich teen experiences. I like her power struggles with Jenny over control of the inner clique. I like her giving her virginity to Chuck in the back of a limo, cheating on Nate. I like that a lot. But what I like most about Blair was the way she defeated Georgina Sparks, who I'd like to talk about as well, played by Michelle Trachtenberg, who, God damn, yeah, I've never felt more bisexual in my entire life. Everyone is so fucking sexy. It's weird. It's not weird. It's great. It's great. I love it. Keep it coming, Gossip Girl. But Georgina Sparks comes in the last handful of episodes of season one because Josh Schwartz is a master of teen drama and he knows exactly what to do. My favorite characters in shows are normally what I call postmodern wrecking balls. Abby Morgan, Dawson's Creek, postmodern wrecking ball. Rachel Katina, One Tree Hill, postmodern wrecking ball. Faith Lahane, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, postmodern wrecking ball. You understand. These are characters that come into postmodern teen dramas with one raison d'etre, with one purpose, one goal in mind to destroy a perfectly good narrative, to crush, destroy, to challenge archetypes and scenarios, to fuck up the design, and watch the fire, the chaos that occurs in its wake. And Georgina Sparks is one of them. I would call probably Trey Atwood on the OC, a postmodern wrecking ball, but he was a lot of things. He was a lot of things. Go watch my OC season 2 analysis video if you wanna hear me talk about Trey Atwood. But I'm just saying that Josh Schwartz knows about this archetype, and he knows that that's what you're supposed to do. When things start to feel too comfortable, which Gossip Girl allowed itself to feel too comfortable for maybe 5 minutes, but that's enough. And the the rapid speed, ultra rich and glamorous world of Gossip Girl, that's enough. It doesn't want you to relax too much. Oh, what? Serena and Dan, they've been happy for way too long now. Let's fuck it up. Bring in Michelle Trachtenberg, bring in the dream girl of every dude my age, bring her in, and let's burn everything down, everything that we so carefully designed. Georgina Sparks, challenges our 2 primary protagonists here. Honestly, they are our moral compasses, are the ones that work. Dan Dan is really supposed to be our introduction into this, ultra-rich elite, group. We might not be able to relate to some of the problems that Chuck Bass and Nathaniel Archibald have. But Dan is kind of our gateway. He's our eyes, and he's also our morality. Dan understands right and wrong. And Serena is our reformed nihilist queen of the damned. And she's trying desperately to stay on the straight and narrow. She's trying desperately to be as good as Dan. Dan inspires Serena to live in a way that is virtuous and authentic. And if what I just said sounded boring, yeah, and that's the problem, right? Gossip Girl has no time for happy endings. Georgina Sparks comes in. Georgina Sparks was a friend of Serena, who was around during Serena's bad girl days. And Georgina and Serena were both there and kind of were around when a dude overdosed on drugs and left him there. Serena, of course, being more virtuous always, inherently, than Georgina, at least called the ambulance before they ran away, but they still ran away. But Georgina is trying to blackmail Serena into remaining a static archetype, right? Chuck Bass rejected his arc. He rejected the narrative and resumed a position that he had originally filled as the nihilistic villain of the pilot episode by the season's end. That was his choice. Serena was trying desperately to fulfill an arc, to experience character growth and emotional change. Georgina Sparks does not like that idea. Georgina wants to keep her a static archetype. Georgina sees the arc coming, and she's seeing that it's leading to a more sanitized place, or to a place that is outside of her control. She's an incredible villain, because what a villain is supposed to do if the villain it's the villain of the narrative, right? I think what a villain is supposed to do in a postmodern way, if you have a postmodern villain, it's what they're supposed to do. Normally, a villain is supposed to challenge the hero, and through those challenges that the hero overcomes to conquer evil and defeat the villain, that's how the hero changes and completes an arc, right? So that's normally like in a standard narrative, that's what the villain's supposed to do. In a postmodern narrative, the villain is supposed to just do everything that she can to keep the hero from experiencing that arc. You understand what I'm saying? She saw the arc coming. She's trying to reject the narrative on a massive scale. She's trying to punish and torture the main character of the show into a position where she's not only not allowed to change, she's almost infantilized to a worse place than she was, a worse place than she's ever been. Georgina Sparks is a fascinating and complex, philosophically astute postmodern villain because she's standing in the way of our lead and the completion of an arc. She does not want her to change. She wants her to be The queen, the nihilistic lost. Georgina loses, not entirely. Dan and Serena do break up as a consequence of Georgina's interference. Georgina pretended to be someone else named Sarah uh, to disrupt and destroy the relationship that Dan and Serena had, and even tried to seduce Dan. And Dan is a far stronger man than me. I would not have lasted 10 seconds if Michelle Trachtenberg was giving me those eyelashes. I don't know, dude, she was hot. I don't know what to say. That's such a villain. I would not have been able to resist. And Dan didn't, like, really resist too much, but he didn't sleep with her. Because he's supposed to be our moral compass. All I know is I would not be, God, what am I even saying at this point? The analysis has evolved to a point where I'm like, yo, I would have just slept with Georgina Sparks. I'm not fucking Dan. Georgina does have an effect, have a lasting effect. She does affect the narrative, but Serena still feels a change. She still gets to feel her arc. So she is still a victorious character, after all. But how Georgina is defeated is by Blair Waldorf. And it's such a beautiful moment. Blair goes up against a postmodern villain that did make Chuck nervous, that did scare and frighten Chuck. Blair faces her head on and sends her away, removes her from the narrative with that billion-dollar grin. She says, "Enjoy reformatory school. Didn't you know I'm the crazy bitch around here?" Even Georgina Sparks, even her influence doesn't work on Blair Waldorf. Blair Waldorf is terrifying, and I find her maddeningly absorbing. I'm obsessed with Blair Waldorf. I think she's a phenomenal character. I love her and Chuck together because that's a kind of energy that could light the world on fire. With the ease, grace, and pleasure that she took out of defeating Georgina, this villain that seemed kind of unstoppable, to be honest. And Michelle Trachtenberg did wonderfully here, by the way, if I could just praise her for a moment. She even looked like she had fun being this devious and evil, and I liked seeing her have fun. But the pleasure that Blair expressed in causing and watching Georgina's demise, that wasn't just sexy. It was politically and philosophically powerful. Blair Waldorf, that's the one character I wouldn't fuck with at all, and neither should you. We can even talk on gossip itself for a second. Gossip is a postmodern reinvention of truth. What is truth? Does truth have any value? Not really. And truth is simply what is agreed on. Truth isn't something like objectivity doesn't necessarily exist. Not really. Or even if it does exist, it doesn't mean there's value on it. The truth can be really boring. Gossip is truth given narrative, arguably. Gossip gossip is the truth of the teenage experience, or gossip is the truth of our modern world. It doesn't matter what actually happened. Facts don't necessarily matter. The narrative does. The ability to reach an arc does. Who's on top matters. Villains and heroes matter, but villains and heroes don't necessarily exist within truth. Villains and heroes, heartbreakers and heart takers, those are the property of gossip. And this is a show that's seemingly obsessed with that insertion of truth, the reinvention of circumstance, the interpretation of an event. Gossip. Is gossip fun? I've never had a better time. Gossip Girl is wonderfully designed. Each episode has an event, or most of the episodes do, have an event that they're leading to, and they have all of these different moving parts that are all like timed explosives, all set to go off to explode at the zenith, at the apex of the event. It could be a masked ball, a wedding, a cotillion, a slumber party. There's always like a big event happening that several or all of the characters are attending. By the time they get there, all the different moving parts from the subplots and main storylines come to a head there, and something huge happens, and it's very theatrical. And the theatricality lends itself to my analysis because the lives of the ultra rich um, are ones that are on display. Gossip Girl itself, each one of these kids, they're being tracked by a website, by technology, because technology plays a big part in this show. I think the most interesting part about it is that it's kind of surveillance. Uh, the surveillance of narrative. Narrative is terrifying in Gossip Girl to me. This is the best postmodern fucking teen drama. This is like what I want from the form. I hope you understand why I'm saying that now. The surveillance of narrative. Everything that they do is being tracked by Gossip Girl, this website that everyone reads within their social bubble, within their world, and their world is the one that matters, right? You can even send tips to Gossip Girl and influence the interpretation of the truth to um build and flesh out the narrative that you want to pursue. That's so cool and complex and sophisticated. Um, but the lives of the ultra rich are on display. And you can read about them on the Gossip Girl blog or website. You can read about it. You can read about everything about them. So, and the fact that they all come to heads at these events in a very theatrical way on a stage in front of a countless amount of eyeballs. That's the teen experience of the surveillance of narrative. And that's also one of the most terrifyingly postmodern readings of the lived teen experience that I've ever watched. And I think it's truthful, and I think it's telling, and I think it's quite remarkable. Um, it's deeply affecting, actually. Jenny's even fun to watch because she gets to fulfill an arc, but she has one of the arcs where she's almost back to square one, knowing that she's better, all the better for it. um, for going on the journey that made her understand and be thankful for what she had originally, because she takes on Blair. She went for the queen and she missed, and she got worse, and we could see her kind of soul deteriorating, and it was tragic for a bit. But by the end, she's happy to be with her dad. She's happy to be creating fabric, creating gowns and dresses in her modest apartment with her family. And so is Dan happy to be with Vanessa, away from this ultra rich group. And then the ultra rich kids are with the ultra rich kids. I've never seen an arc kind of work in this way where all this change happens because it is perfect television, right? Because you have to have some sort of baseline. You have to stay true to the melody or to the beat that the pilot lays down. I think that's also why this show, I think, is so masterfully designed, because the arc can take us so far and they experience so much change, and then our primaries are back within their original archetypal roles, but we feel that their archetypes have expanded, with the exception of Chuck, who has deliberately made his archetype even smaller, which is why he's so fucking cool. Talks about the currency of the teen experience. Currency of the teen experience, secrets, gossip, things other people want to know that you know. That's what currency is. Every teenager pays a high price for not only popularity, but status and romance. There's always a high price. And a lot of kids can't afford it no matter where you come from because the price is emotion, the price is soul, the price is sanity. The price is your reason, and the price is normally unreasonable. I was deeply, 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 deeply impressed, shocked, and mesmerized by Gossip Girl Season 1. I can't wait to be back here in a week talking about Season 2. I could go on and on about this. And I know when I go to edit this video and put it up, I'll be like, man, why didn't I talk about that? Or why didn't I say more? But I'm gonna save you from my ramblings. Just know that this is what I consider to be teen drama at its best. It's everything I want from the form. It's postmodern in a way that I find challenging and confrontational. It deals with class and social stratification, so it has a political kind of subtext that I find valuable um, to engage with. It has beautiful actors playing extraordinarily conflicted characters, and this kind of insane playground of wealth and betrayal, with just thin veil of hope, and even thinner than that, possibility of a sincere act. Gossip Girl is nearly Shakespearean in its postmodern tragedy, and I love it. I love it so much that it's kind of unreal. So thank you for watching me. Hopefully you continue to watch my Gossip Girl videos. I think we're gonna go to some really, really cool places, the further we get into this show. And I can't wait to explore more of these characters in different ways with more and more of you. Thank you for watching. XOXO. Hello, hello. I'm your cult boyfriend, and today we're talking about Gossip Girl Season 2. And wow, I loved it. I continue to love this show so much. I am getting worried, right? I'm not getting worried. I'm just like, after these first two seasons, it is my favorite television show, But I guess I'm worried because we have four more seasons, and this is normally the point where a lot of shows start showing, third season and onwards, they start showing signs of weaknesses. But so far, Gossip Girl is just incredibly beautiful. Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage are incredible television auteurs and showrunners. I love the work they did with Gossip Girl. It continued the beautiful philosophical dialogue that was ever present in the first season. It continues it in the second. I think it expands it, and I think it does a lot of, like, subtle rearrangements of its own anatomy within the show, like, structurally, that I found very interesting. I think we should talk about the more, complex, concepts first. Let's front load this analysis with the more complex things first. So, gossip, according to, the first season of Gossip Girl, and also gossip according to most postmodern films. Please watch the film from 2000 called Gossip. It's one of my favorite films ever. Stars James Marsden, Lena Headey, um, and fuck, I'm drawing a blank. I'm so sorry. Norman Reedus and Joshua Jackson. Please watch that movie. It's incredible. Kate Hudson gives a phenomenal performance in it, and it's an interesting precursor to Gossip Girl. But Gossip Girl does it better than Gossip. Gossip, the film, asks the question, is gossip fun? Gossip Girl answers it with, not only is it fun, it's unavoidable. So gossip, as according to Gossip Girl, is truth given narrative, or even untruth given deliberation, given purpose, right? Truth is just a sheet of facts. The narrative is what history is made out of. History isn't made out of dates and times and specifics. History is an organization of narratives. Meta narratives involved too. In fact, the confluence of gossip, the construction of gossip, is how meta narratives are formed. And we, as people living in the society of the spectacle, we kind of look at our lives cinematically. We look at our lives thematically, right? Which might not be necessarily organic ways to view life, but we do view it that way as we've been trained through literature, through film, through television, through theater to look for arcs within our own lives. Look for those moments where things change. Look for those moments of character growth. We look at ourselves as characters and the people around us as additional players and co-stars. Gossip is what provides us with those arcs. And in the postmodern world, which Gossip is a postmodern masterpiece, so far 2 seasons in, it's a postmodern masterpiece. Gossip is exactly how truth is given narrative, because truth doesn't necessarily have an objective value. In fact, the only way that truth or untruth has value is the narrative that propels them forward. And on Gossip Girl in season 2, they start to, you can give leads and scoops to the Gossip Girl website, to the Gossip Girl blog, and you can affect the narrative within your own life. You can use a lie to gain a greater sense of closure or to make your arc come full circle. You can use the truth to make your arc come full circle. You can impact, manipulate, and kind of chart the course of your own character growth and development, including the growth of those around you. And that's literally how, in our postmodern universe, that's how we actually survive anyway. That's how we live. That's how we grow. Growth is a byproduct of narrative and meta narratives. Growth is not a part of the actual human experience. The human experience, as we know it today in our postmodern universe, is gossip. Gossip is the way that we interact with truth. It's the way that we interact with the people in our lives. It's the way that truths are formed. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's actually objectively true. What matters is that the narrative is good, if the narrative is juicy, if the narrative leads you to an arc or to a downfall. That's what matters more than truth. Truth is just a characteristic of gossip, which may or may not necessarily be true. It's full of contradictions, but so is revolution, so is love, so is the idea of development as a mature human being. And season 2 of Gossip Girl is really interesting because near the end of it, they try to out the Gossip Girl. In a large way, they're trying to out like God. It's almost social deicide. They're trying to out the person who has who has pushed them into certain directions. So they're trying to out the writer, the author of their existence, of their lives. Because without Gossip Girl kind of pushing these people into kind of areas that are interesting, that are dramatic, we wouldn't have had these character dynamics or character arcs. And by the end, the characters themselves inside Gossip Girl start to actively reject and rebel against whoever Gossip Girl is. But there is a sense of companionship when Gossip Girl's like, "Well, you didn't catch me, but I'll be coming to college with you." God is dead. God has long been dead in the postmodern universe. And I mean, we don't need symbols like that. But what God provided us before was gossip, and what do we have now? We have gossip incarnate, gossip eternal, gossip literal. And I thought that was extremely interesting. It's always extremely interesting to see how how the 6 or 7 main characters in Gossip Girl, interact with gossip, and form their own identity crises, and definitely reach a new sincerity through the untruth of Gossip Girl. I mean, Chuck Bass. rejected, refused the notion of a character arc at the end of the first season. And in this one, as motivated by the meta narratives that were being exposed by the Gossip Girl blog, he tells Blair that he loves her. It takes him in 22 entire episodes, a whole season, to tell her that he loves her, and he tells her it over and over and over again. And that's what we end the season on. Gossip doesn't necessarily lead to terrible things. That is absolutely untrue of gossip. Gossip is written by the postmodern hand of God, which of course is dead, but we have a narrative, and we should all be thankful for narratives. When Gossip Girl is outing them at their graduation, she tells them exactly what archetype they are, what role they have filled. You know, Nate is the class whore, Dan is the ultimate insider, Blair a weakling, Chuck a coward, and Serena officially irrelevant. It propels these characters to actually fulfill some sort of mature character growth or development. Being called out like that brings the characters closer to their arc, like to actually complete their arc, to the completion of their growth throughout the season. Because some of them weren't gonna go there, because we have very stubborn characters in Gossip Girl, and sometimes the meta narrative has to be challenged, and then the characters within it have to feel as if they're rejecting the meta narrative by trying to figure out and expose who Gossip Girl's identity really is. But by doing that, Gossip Girl as a show and as a blog, as this entity, as this divine one, has won because that sort of rejection of the meta narrative helped every single character fulfill a character arc because they were on the edge of completing it. They just needed a push. They just needed to be ridiculed by the narrative itself so that the characters within it would reject the meta narrative to actually fulfill the arcs that were established in the first episode of season 2 and actually do come to completion by the end of the second season. It's an extremely complex and sophisticated kind of quality that I'm talking about, but it is ever present in all of Gossip Girl and all the first 2 seasons that I've watched, and I am so floored and stunned by that because I do think that that's deeply philosophical. I do think that that is speaking to me as a person, and to you, if you would be so cynical as to approve of my postmodern reading of the human condition. I think that Gossip Girl is extremely intelligent, and I think that its philosophy is unparalleled. I think it's a beautiful show and entirely sophisticated. Josh Schwartz, the showrunner, is a fucking genius and undervalued as one of the great artists of his time. I'm so impressed by Gossip Girl season 2. My favorite characters continue to be Blair and Chuck. I loved their back and forth here. And just when you think the show has started something that it couldn't finish or lost interest in, like Blair sleeping with Jack, Chuck's uncle, and they kind of brush that away, but they bring it back at the very end. I'm like, oh my god, Gossip Girl, you did think this through. I thought that you dropped the ball on that topic, but no, it came through because it had to in order for Blair to fulfill her arc. Because that was like a seed that was planted 10 or 12 episodes before. And you'd think by watching poor television shows or poor teen dramas that that was just a ball that they considered, that was an avenue they considered going down and exploring, but then chose against it. No, that's exactly the avenue they were supposed to go down in order for Chuck to come to terms with his love for Blair. Chuck would not have reached his arc this time had the narrative itself, had the Gossip Girl blog, which is a stand-in for the creator like Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, um, had it not prompted him to reject the meta narrative of it all and accept Blair Waldorf and vice versa too. Like it's so fucking smart. But Chuck is delightful this season. I still find him incredibly cinematic. I think he's a fascinating character, and he's still kind of villainous that I love. And Blair, oh my god, Leighton Meester is just extraordinary. Not only is she beautiful, she's the most entertaining character on this entire show. Um, Reminds me a little bit of Rachel Bilson on the OC, which makes sense because Josh Schwartz, who is the auteur behind Gossip Girl, was also the auteur behind the OC. But I think that Blair is pulling it off a lot better, and Blair is a lot more sophisticated than Summer was. And but I'm saying that in the sense that he is kind of given this freedom as an actor to do some really interesting and insane things with her performance, and it always pays off. She's always so fascinating to watch and entertaining as all fuck. She's the coolest person on the entire show. And Chuck and Blair together, that's where you get Dangerous Liaisons. That's where you get Cruel Intentions. That's where you get like a microcosm of the future leaders of the fucking world playing these little cruel and callous games with these social dynamics and politics, and you can kind of extrapolate that to a larger scale thing that's going on with the elites and the wealthiest people in our country as adults, and it's really cool to see. I love those two together. Georgina Sparks comes back, who is my eternal crush. Michelle Trachtenberg, marry me eventually. You don't have to do it right now, but down the road, I'll wait for you. Georgina Sparks is so fucking cool. And she comes in near the end of the season, right? And it plays into my reading of it as a rejection of the narrative to manipulate the meta narrative to achieve an actual arc, because they bring her in to combat. It's Army Hammer who's playing Gabriel, and Poppy, a socialite, who are kind of like the de facto villains of this season, and they are a little underwhelming. Army Hammer does fine, but Poppy is truly a forgettable presence, and I think she should have been a much more fierce kind of figure in the show. But Gossip Girl makes good on that shortcoming by bringing Georgina Sparks back. And when she comes back, she's come back from that reformatory school, right? She's all about Jesus. And Blair and Chuck and Serena and even Dan and Nate are like, no, no, we have to get Georgina back into character. We have to get her back into the role that she occupies within this narrative. We have to snap her out of this and get her back into character. And like over time, Georgina makes that switch, and she is back to being evil and sexy and perfect. Tell Jesus that the bitch is back. And we don't actually get to see what Georgina does to Poppy to get all of the money that she scammed from everyone in New York back. We don't actually see what she does to Poppy, which I do think is a slight missed opportunity, because in the episode before like the way that it's set up is that she turns and she's like watching Poppy from like a limo, and she tells Blair on the phone that the bitch is back and don't worry about Poppy. I'll destroy her. Then the next episode, we don't see Georgina, and it spends an awful lot of time in a flashback to Lily's youth. We got a lot of cool cameos in there, like Ryan Henson from Veronica Mars, and of course Kristen Ritter from Veronica Mars and Gilmore Girls. It's great seeing her, and also Psycho Derek. It was cool, but I didn't necessarily think it informed the character of Lily, but I think what would have been far more fascinating is if they kind of cut that out and designated more resources to actually watching Georgina destroy Poppy. I think that would have been more interesting to watch. I also just want to watch Michelle Trachtenberg more, so like it might be coming from a horny place rather than an insightful one. But I actually do think that it's a weird thing to do in the episode before the finale, have a flashback episode that feels a bit more playful than powerful. I think that if we saw what Georgina did to Poppy, that would have been more powerful. But I'm sure Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, I'm sure that Gossip Girl had its reasonings for this. And we do get to see Georgina in the finale for a few minutes saying that Poppy's done for. Check your bank account. I got all your money back. And by the way, I would love to be a roommate with my best friend Blair. I can't wait for season 3. I love Georgina Sparks so much. She is my Abby Morgan, Rachel Katina wrecking ball from hell, and I want to marry her. She's also Faith from Buffy. I just want to marry this fucking chick. Georgina's great, but what's most fascinating about her inclusion is the part where Chuck and Blair and the people who she wronged so deeply in the first season, because she was the primary antagonist of the first season, ultimately. Those people that she wronged, her victims, were like, no, we have to get you back into character. You're back into the Upper East Side narrative, Georgina. You need to be evil. I don't care if you found God. Jesus is a fucking joke. We need to get you back into the narrative. Remember your role. Remember what archetype you occupy. Remember who you are, because we need you now. And she snaps back into it for the benefit of the narrative of the show. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And that's telling of our actual lived experiences. Georgina wasn't allowed to have an arc and become a good person because the heroes of Gossip Girl needed to complete theirs. Which what is damaging to Georgina Sparks is thrilling for me to see, and also incredibly valuable um, for the main 6 or 7 characters of Gossip Girl. It's incredible. It's incredible to consider. I loved being around all of these characters. I love Nate to death, and Nate has really impressed me with where they're going with his character and how they always seem to pull it off. Like sometimes I feel like Nate is the half considered character here. Like they have well, Nate and Vanessa are kind of half considered ultimately. It feels like they have a very, very good idea of Chuck, Blair, Dan, Jen, Serena, Rufus, and Lily. But when it comes to Nate and Vanessa, I think they're a bit more loose with it, which I think is good for teen drama. Like I don't want everything to feel like a switch watch. Swiss watch. Why would I say a term that I can't actually say? Swiss watch. I don't want everything to feel hyper organized and like directed. I like a bit of looseness with it because where I can see where the Blair and Chuck or Serena arcs are taking me, I had no clue what they were going to do with Nate and Vanessa. And the most exciting part is I don't necessarily think that they knew either. I think that they were their kind of loose, more free kind of narrative formats to look at, and they ended up doing some really cool and I feel like spontaneous things with Nate and Vanessa. Nate particularly impressed me. I think Nate has a lot more depth to him than Vanessa, because Nate is this punished rich boy in season 2. He is punished. His father is arrested by the FBI. His mother is really weird. He's taken advantage of, exploited sexually by like a Machen Amick cameo in here, by the older rich women within the Upper East Side. Uh, he's pushed aside for Chuck by Blair. Uh, I think that he is punished deeply in this season, but they pull it off so well. Nate takes it with grace, honestly. He's the most gracefully punished rich boy I have ever seen on a television show. He is that poor little rich boy archetype, but he also transcends that. And I'm just really impressed in a show that puts so much emphasis on narrative and meta narratives, and how impacting them means providing yourself with character growth and an arc. Nate seems to be the one who's just kind of going with it, you know? He seems to be the most free, in my opinion, because he seems to be the one who is the least affected by Gossip Girl, by the meta narratives of his own life, by the romantic entanglements that he constantly finds himself within. He seems to be the most nihilistically free, you know what I mean? The most nihilistically abandoned, which kind of makes him the most blissful character on this show. I do like Nate a lot. Nate is fascinating to watch. He really is, and he's a fascinatingly constructed and composed character because, like I said, I think that Josh Schwartz was treating him a bit loose, you know, giving him a bit more room for opportunity. And I really couldn't tell where his story was going to go, and that made it pretty exciting. And I love when shows are designed like that, when there is a design, but there are a few unknown variables to keep things interesting and exciting, and able to change on the turn of a dime. I also find it interesting that they did that whole episode about the Age of Innocence, right? The Edith Wharton novel, or the Martin Scorsese film, because the Gossip Girl is aligning itself directly with the hyper violence of high society, which violence is more a gesture, it's more a movement like that of a dancer's. It's about social graces and etiquette. Martin Scorsese called The Age of Innocence the most violent film he's ever made, and this coming from an actually brutal and ultra violent director who I really do appreciate. It makes so much sense. The Age of Innocence is the most brutal thing he's ever done, but the brutality comes from bat of an eyelash, the turn of a cheek, seemingly well-intentioned, but entirely vicious. And that's how we have Gossip Girl. I think it is more Cruel Intentions. I think it's more Dangerous Liaisons than it is The Age of Innocence, or even more A Room with a View. I get a lot of A Room with a View vibes, which A Room with a View is one of my favorite films ever made, so keep those vibes coming, please. Serena was a really great character. Thought she had a very interesting arc. I like seeing her bounce around the different kinds of men that that were fascinating a certain component of her, a certain quality within herself that she wanted to express or explore more. Like we had that artist, we had Dan, of course, and then we had Gabriel. Um, I think it's an incredible assortment that kind of exposes the multifaceted core of Serena van der Woodsen. Um, she's artistic and rebellious and beautiful. She is introspective, insightful, and always well composed. Yet she also has the elements of a Gabriel. She has the capacity for viciousness. She has the ability to manipulate and seduce. But even then, she has the she has a history of being used by people who are more exploitative and powerful because she has a heart. That's what I found interesting about Gabriel is that he definitely didn't want to take Rufus's money. He tried not to several times. So there is a bit of heart to Gabriel. And I think that Serena at her worst, there is still heart there. But there's also all those other components. She's not simply the qualities of Gabriel do not simply make her up or provide her with her totality of character. Like I said, she has Dan's insight and desires, and she also has the artist's effortless self-expression and kind of rebellious instincts. Serena van der Woodsen's a very interesting character, but I think the most sophisticated parts of her are done with a nuance. They're done with who she is at the time, like currently within the plot, who she is engaging with, because that's a part of her that she's trying to amplify. And I think she's a perfectly well constructed character, and I loved watching Serena this season a lot. But yeah, Blair and Chuck, they are still my dream team. I love them so much. They're so cool. Blair went through a fucking lot, and so did Chuck. Everyone went through a lot. Everyone had a real arc, you know? Everyone impressed me. I'm so impressed by this season of television. I think it's beautiful. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. One of the most flawless things I have ever seen. If it keeps it up, if Gossip Girl can keep this kind of thought, this kind of beauty, this kind of like eroticism, this kind of fucking cool shit, if it could keep, if it could stay as good as it is right now, then it will be the best television show I've ever seen, and definitely the best teen drama I have ever watched. I am thrilled and I'm grateful for this show at this point. I have a lot of high hopes. In fact, all I have are high hopes. This show has done nothing but intensely amaze and shock me. I'm in love with this show. I'm in love with every character on it, and I can't wait to see where Gossip Girl will lead me next. Thank you so much for watching my video. I'm Zach. I'm your cult boyfriend. Subscribe to my channel. Go on this Gossip Girl journey with me. We're still at the beginning after all. We have a lot more to get through. Comment with your thoughts on Gossip Girl, with your thoughts on my reading, my insight concerning the show. And also tell me who your favorite character is. Try not to do any spoilers, because I do read these comments and I'm trying not to get spoiled. Full disclosure, oh my god, I was talking to a girl who shall not be named in real life. I brought up this show and how I'm enjoying it, and this fucking bitch told me who Gossip Girl was. Luckily, it's not ruining my experience of watching the show, but she told me who the identity of Gossip Girl was. She told me that when I was watching season 1. that is deeply affecting my viewing of this. It's not fair. It's only affecting it in so much as I wish I didn't know, but it hasn't ruined it for me at all. Especially since I'm calling it best teen drama ever. Right now, currently, after watching 2 seasons, I think it's the best teen drama ever. I just wish this chick who was flirting with me didn't think that the best way of flirting with me was to spoil the identity of Gossip Girl. And I asked her, like, okay, well, do you find that out like in the first season or something? And she said, no, you find that out in the final episode. I'm like, you ruined over 100 episodes of television, or you tried to. I blocked her, and I have not seen her again. You don't fuck with me and my teen dramas. I don't care how cute you are. Fuck off. Don't spoil it in the comments, I guess is what I'm saying. That's the moral value of the anecdote I just told you. Yes, I can't believe I know who the Gossip Girl is. I knew who it was by episode 3 because that's when I talked to her. Fuck you. Fuck you. I had a mental breakdown. I had a nervous fucking breakdown by the end of this video. I hope you appreciated it. Thank you for watching me. I'm gonna leave before they put me in a straight jacket. I'm your cult boyfriend. Today I'll be talking about the third season of Gossip Girl, a show that I am absolutely in love with right now. And the third season, another masterpiece. I loved it. And it's kind of surprising. I was told that in the third season is where the show starts to really dip in quality. It's where it starts to take a nosedive. But couldn't be more incorrect. I can see why they would think that. We might get into those reasons later, but it's just sleight of hand. Gossip Girl is still in complete control, and Gossip Girl is still entirely masterful. And in this video, I'll probably just be discussing the things I found most interesting about the season, because there's a lot of different moving parts in this season. Far too many for me to cover in one video. And I really just want to devote my time to what I found to be the most interesting. We are starved for narrative in our lives. We're starved for plot lines, for story structure, for character development, for drive and character motivation. We seek out narratives. Life does not organically have like a narrative system to it. We seek them out. We like to look back at our lives episodically as if they're stories. Scheming, plotting, that's exactly what we all do, quite hyper literally, plotting our lives. Narratives don't just happen, and when they do, it's normally because it's forced upon you by an outside variable. Life is role play. It's pretty cool because when we come back to this season, uh, we get the rug pulled out from under us a few times by Chuck and Blair, who their kink is narrative. Their kink is plotting. Their kink is narrative. Chuck as the cheating husband and Blair as the scorned woman. Chuck and Blair's kink is narrative. It's great public theater. Serena, on the other hand, wants to game the meta-narrative itself, to find who she really is outside of the grand design. Is there existence outside of the grand design of narrative? And she thinks that finding her father will help her discover this. Of course, throughout the season, when her father does come back and is just a better manipulator and con man, it kind of destroys a part of her that thought there was existence outside of this grand narrative. Chuck even says in the final episode, I think the most revealing lines of the entire season, with he's speaking to Jenny, trying to console her in a morbid way, but still he's still trying to help her. He says, but the world that you're looking for only exists from the outside. I only survive because I know that it's empty. Chuck, a young man haunted by the ghost of his father, betrayed, by every member of his family that's still alive, except for his found ones, right? Except for Lily and Blair to a certain extent. But it is really fascinating how Serena tries to game the meta-narrative by manipulating the paparazzi. Because paparazzi are meta-narrative, and she's trying to get her father's attention in the beginning of the season by acting a fool with Carter Basin. She figures out how to game the meta-narrative itself. So the dynamic I found most fascinating this season, I think that every character did some pretty interesting things. But the most interesting characters, MVPs of this season, are Chuck and, very surprisingly, Jenny Humphrey. I thought Blair was great. Okay, I thought Blair was excellent, but she didn't quite steal the show this time. Because the secret weapon were its two most nihilistic and self-destructive qualities, and those are found embodied, hyper-personified by Chuck Bass and Jenny Humphrey. Jenny is an incredibly fascinating character. I get the idea from Jenny that, in a large way, she was supposed to be the chosen one. You know, like she was supposed to be that thing, that girl, that person that defied the narrative or at least made the narrative genuine or sincere. But no, what Jenny ultimately came to symbolize, much to the dismay of the schemers and plotters and manipulators around her, she came to symbolize how the meta narrative, how the incredibly artificial and superficial and self-obsessed world that is in Gossip Girl, how that corrupts young girls with very real, tangible dreams. I didn't mention Willa Holland in my last video analysis, but she plays like a foil to Jenny Humphrey. She is a model who befriends Jenny and manipulates her and abuses her. And she reappears in this season to drug her and try to get her basically gang raped at like a bachelor party. She like leaves her there with all these models. Willa Holland is great. You know, I just forgot to mention her. Super sexy. Oh my God, dude. Remember her from the OC, which makes sense because obviously the showrunners here are Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz. They both come from the OC. Josh Schwartz, in particular, created the OC, but Stephanie Savage, I've been doing a lot more research into Gossip Girl, and Stephanie Savage, I think it's at least 50-50 between Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, if not Stephanie Savage having a little bit more input, a little bit more control over Gossip Girl, and she worked on the OC pretty intimately as well. It's just when you go and read, if you go look for insight, for interviews about the philosophical or like aesthetic frameworks of the show, you'll mostly find information coming directly from Stephanie Savage. Now, that's not a huge indicator of who's really making all these decisions. I like to think it's a joint process. I like to think it's a true partnership. But just judging from the output, she's at least the most vocal about the direction of the show, at least in the third season. So the architect of the third season, I'm pretty comfortable saying is mostly Stephanie Savage because we can start to see some deviations from the first two seasons. But I don't want to leave Jenny Humphrey quite yet. Jenny Humphrey is that girl who wanted desperately to be a fashion designer. The little girl from Brooklyn that could, the little girl who ingratiated herself into the highest echelons, into the upper crust of Manhattan's Upper East Side elite. She did it. It ate her up from the inside. It destroyed her. It corroded her. It gutted her. It took the soul of Jenny that we came to know and love as this sincere and naive but kind of daring thing, this presence throughout the show. And in season 3, punishment, 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 until she's deflowered by Chuck in the final episode of this season. And Chuck, of course, you can't have some sort of romantic scene with the two of them together without being reminded of the pilot episode of the entire show where Chuck tries to rape her. And it takes her 3 entire seasons to give herself to that punishment, to the punishment of the elite. Now, I know that it's not framed as menacingly as that, but you have to remember the way that the meta narrative operates. And that's what we learned through Jenny Humphrey. Jenny Humphrey could manipulate the narrative just as well as anybody else could. but she was an easier target, an easy punching bag, and she was on a self-destructive tailspin, a spiral. And it was heartbreaking seeing what happens to Jenny throughout the course of these 3 seasons. I didn't exactly realize where they were going because they didn't make it too obvious, but she is the secret weapon of this season because she ends up dating a drug dealer, and some of the drugs that she provides for him to sell together, she takes them from Lily. She thinks the pills are oxycodone, but truly they are ivermectin, and they are being prescribed wrongfully. Basically, William, um, Serena's Serena's long lost father, and I mean Lily's estranged spouse has been fooling Lily into believing that she was sick, and it's this huge plot, it's this huge master grand scheme, and Jenny is the smoking gun because Jenny has the pills, and a girl gets mad at Jenny saying like, "Yeah, you gave me a bunch of antibiotics, and it made me sick as fuck. It weren't oxy." So she puts two and two together, and she calls the one person that she can trust that she hasn't completely betrayed yet, and that is Chuck. And I like the Chuck and Jenny partnership at first, right? Well, it's a partnership to the very end because they are both on self-destructive spirals. It's just that Jenny's is more tragic because she's so young and it's so avoidable. With Chuck, it's like you signed your you signed your pact with the devil years ago. You somehow deserve every bad thing that could ever happen to you. That's the tragedy of Chuck. But I like seeing them work together to try and uncover Will Vanderwoodson's grand scheme. It's so funny because Serena was trying to find her father, to try to find some sincerity or authenticity, something genuine in this world that seems to be defined by paparazzi, by media, by created narratives, real or unreal. And she tries to find that through her father, and her father is the architect of this grand scheme, this grand design that is so cold, so well thought out that it takes every single hero of Gossip Girl to uncover it. And I love when they kind of work together to figure it out, like they're like a gang of Scoobies or something, and they all come together and figure it out. And it takes exactly 2 scenes for one of them to like start to betray the other, which just so happens to be Jenny by trying to give Will a heads up, like get out of here because I want my family back. Because that's also the tragic part, because Jenny wants to go back to Brooklyn by the end. She sees the artifice for what it is. She sees the narrative for what it is. And if this is what high stakes living is, when there's good guys and there's bad guys, like an old silent movie screams in a vacuum, she'd rather go back to being unseen, unheard, uncared for, unloved. She'd rather do that. But the narrative, the meta narrative, but Gossip Girl has other plans for Jenny Humphrey. Chuck is supposed to be waiting up there in the Empire State Building for Blair to come there and like prove that she loves him because he's like, if you're a minute late, I will close my heart to you forever. And before we go to Chuck's greatest sin, ultimately, Chuck went through so much this season. And I loved seeing Chuck and Blair together. It was perfect. It was these two people who are completely aware of the narratives that they create. In fact, it's a kink for them. It's how they survive. It's how they continue to survive. They are the directors, the playwrights of the public theater that is for East Side existence. And they're perfect together, and they have so much fun. Of course, they fall apart by the end of the season, but not before Chuck is brutally betrayed by his mother and by his uncle, um, in a way that would make the Greek tragedians blush. Like, Chuck went through an awful lot. And by the end, Chuck thinks that Blair has completely turned, her back on him. So, he tries to regress into the old archetype that he was and finishes what he started in the pilot. And Jenny is at such a self-destructive point because she's so in love with Nate. No one loves her. No one loves her. She's the most unloved, the loneliest living girl in New York. They both regress. Chuck regresses to his point in the pilot, and Jenny becomes so numb to the narrative, to trying to fit in within it, and to trying to change it, to change its course. She surrenders to it and just becomes this numb pawn within a grander scheme. That's all we ultimately are. It's a deeply nihilistic ending here because Chuck and Jenny sleep together, and that, of course, is Jenny's first time having sex. It's the ultimate corruption. Now, Chuck's not trying to be villainous, uh, like in this act. In fact, I think he's like pretty understandable, but he still does it. It's still the ultimate sign of defeat. I think Jenny's been defeated by the narrative, by Gossip Girl, by the grand design of the Upper East Side. She's been defeated by it, and Chuck was basically deflowering the corpse of something that was once pure but is now so unrecognizable that it's tortured and hopeless. It was a really nihilistic season, which is interesting because there are so many fun moments. It's mostly fun, right? Because I think that that's where people have problems. Are like Gossip Girl starts to take a nosedive. No, it doesn't. I think it starts to take a nosedive if you never watched the OC. But if you watch the OC, if you studied the OC like I have, and like I know a few of you who watch my channel do because I covered it on here, um, this kind of heightened realism was always here. This kind of crazy comedy, it's definitely the kind of show where Hilary Duff could have like a 6 episode arc on the show for really no apparent reason. Well, there's a philosophical reason. You have to relay everything back to the narrative and to the idea that all of our lives are made up by narratives and that our lives, that's what memories are. They are how we remember plot lines and episodes. We remember our lives episodically. Our lives are soap operas, right? And we seek out the narratives, the storylines that we want to pursue, the ones that are thrust upon us. Those are the dark episodes, right? Because those are someone else's narratives that we have to work through. Those are how we find our antagonists, and we all have antagonists. We all have main character syndrome. And even if you don't, you're a supporting player in someone else's more impressive story. Life is nihilistic, and Gossip Girl knows this, but Gossip Girl also knows that life is really fucking funny and can be really sexy and cool and it can be just as innocent as it is craved. Like it can be everything all at once. That's the fun of narratives because there's no objective truth. Truth, truth is not a list of facts. Truth is gossip. Gossip is truth. Gossip is fun. Of course, we start the season with my eternal crush, Georgina Sparks, showing up and just being a complete fucking postmodern wrecking ball. And every chance that she gets, um, Dan, you're a lucky fuck. What are you talking? The most interesting things Dan did this season involved Georgina Sparks. If I could say anything, I think Dan isn't it's completely necessary. Dan and Vanessa to me are like pretty boring. I think they're supposed to be boring though to show the average lives, but when it's juxtaposed or contrasted with like something that Blair and Chuck are doing or Serena and Nate are up to or even Rufus and Lily, they definitely Jenny. Jenny is entirely like all encompassing. She's amazing this season. But Dan and Vanessa, they're so boring. They are so boring together. I really liked Dan when he was fucking around with Georgina because it gave Georgina license to be the postmodern wrecking ball that she was designed to be. And when I say postmodern wrecking ball, I mean these unknown variables that enter into a situation to cause trouble, to tear everything down, to look at all the careful narratives that were created by all the different characters, all of their hopes and dreams and wants and desires, and she crushes them, or she inverts them, or she like redirects them, right? Because she gets to drop the huge bomb that Scott is Lily and Rufus's love child and walk off the show. Like leave. That is the ultimate postmodern wrecking ball move. Or it's coming back in the final minutes of the season to go, Dan, he looks just like you. Here's my fucking baby. Here's your baby. It's like that's a postmodern wrecking ball, all right? It's a character who every time you see her, you're like, oh, it's about to get interesting, and everyone's gonna hate it, but I'm gonna love it. Think Abby Morgan from Dawson's Creek or Rachel Gatina from One Tree Hill. There are plenty of postmodern wrecking balls out there, and Georgina Sparks is one of the very best ones. I actually did like seeing Hilary Duff on this show. She was fun. She was really fun. That made for Dan to have an interesting storyline. Like I said, everything relates and relays, I guess, back to the idea, the theme of narratives and creating your own narratives. And of course, she is the celebrity who is trying to lead a more genuine existence, and I think just gets caught up within the another intricate tangle of wires that are the roles and dynamics and role reversals of the Upper East Side of college of Blair and Dan and Vanessa. Um, but it was great seeing her. She's really fun to have around. It was cool. Fashion plays a really huge part on the show. Um, Fashion is really expressive, right? I noticed it most in this season because while Jenny is on this spiral, and I think it's true of all the other seasons. I just wasn't available to engage with this aspect of the show. But Jenny is constantly her fashion, it's so important to most of the characters on the show, but her being a designer as well, I think that, what she wears completely, amplifies how she feels, what her character motivation is, what her narrative drives are, or narrative desires are, right? Because most of the time, things do not work out for Jenny, but she is dressed like some Upper East Side punk rock debutante. She's dressed hopefully, but with a nihilistic harshness to her features, and I think that the fashion is excellent. I just started noticing it this time, especially with characters like Jenny and Chuck and Blair and Serena. That's where the fashion I think is at its most expressive and amplified, and those are probably the characters who care the most about what they're wearing. And fashion is certainly a way of vocalizing without speech, just amplifying how you feel and how you want the world around you to perceive you. And I think that Gossip Girl handles fashion in a masterful way, in a way that isn't distracting. Because as I said, I didn't really engage with it too much until the third season, and now these scenes have even more dimensions to them, have an even greater amount of aesthetic and philosophical texture to them. The texturing is incredible. I can now watch every scene and see it in multitudes. And one of those levels of watching the scene is through the fashion decisions, through what the characters are wearing, or even the garments that they are holding. And I think it's fabulous. I think that there should be a channel that just hyper analyzes um, the costume design on the show, because I think it's incredible to look at, and I think it's saying so much. So much. It's possible to get through certain storylines just by watching what the characters are wearing because you'll see who has the upper hand, who is vulnerable, who is strong, who is lonely, and who is desperate, and who is truly targeted. Maybe who's the new queen. I thought season 3 was an extremely masterful season. I'm still deeply impressed by Gossip Girl. 3 seasons in, I can reiterate, I can repeat, I can reemphasize, baby. I can tell you again that, yeah, it's the best teen drama I've ever seen. I'm 3 seasons in, I've got 3 more to go, but if it keeps this up, wow. I mean, it's already in the top 3, you know? It's already in the top 3. I think it could take the number 1 spot. I think it could beat the likes of Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Veronica Mars and the OC, My So-Called Life, The Vampire Diaries. I think that Gossip Girl can beat all of them. It has it in it. Um, I think I don't know how to combat the criticisms to season 3 because I'm not too familiar with them. I like to do a lot of these reviews in a vacuum when it comes to the fandom. I don't like to know what the fandom thinks. I film these videos like really far in advance because I don't want to engage with the fandom. I don't want I want my reading of the show to be my own, to be mine, and not affected by what the general community thinks or what the broader community how the broader community feels about a certain season or episode or character. So but I do know that that people are start calling season 3, that's where they say it starts to get a bit crazy and messy. I don't agree. And if anything's getting messy, I think that's telling of the characters starting to lose grip of the narrative. See, that's the perfect thing about the framework established by Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz. Because even if the show gets messy, you can reasonably argue that it's because the characters themselves are getting messy when it comes to manipulation, when it comes to keeping control of their lives and the narrative and the meta narratives that are used to express their lives. Like, that's what makes the show so brilliant. Because there's 1,000 postmodern safeguards to keep it interesting and entertaining and perfectly. It's like the tone is perfect. I don't even see like even if there is like a bad season, you can reasonably argue that that's because the characters themselves were creating poor narratives. You know, like that it's such a brilliant show because it built in 1,000 postmodern safety nets to keep it from floundering. It's so good. Gossip Girl season 3, does it get like crazier or messier? No, I mean every season of Gossip Girl should understandably raise the stakes a bit. You know, I mean this season ends with Chuck getting shot in some Eastern European red light district. You know, but I have season 4 right here. Hey, look at him, alive. Also, look at her. I felt like she was actually leaving the show. I thought that she was finally escaping the narrative, but it looks like I'll have her in season 4, which I'm not complaining about because, yeah, Jenny and Chuck were the two best characters in season 3. I just thought that her last episode in season 3 did feel like a bon voyage of sorts. So I'm kind of surprised that she is coming back. But yeah, Chuck's obviously still alive. But my main point was with Gossip Girl specifically, just like with the OC, right? You have to raise the stakes each season. Each season, you got to raise the stakes because that is the name of the game. That is teen drama. And Gossip Girl does it really, really well, and in my opinion, effortlessly. And you have to bite the bullet. If you see a shark, jump that motherfucker. I don't care. Jump it. Jump the shark, baby. Jump it over and over and over again because that's how our lives are made up. Think of how many times that you took a leap of faith. Think of how many times that you did something absurd and your life kind of changed. It didn't get messier. The characters' dynamics got more complicated. The messiness that you perceive is just the results of all the extra threads, of all the extra hurt heartstrings, right? Because now when the characters betray and scheme and hurt each other and stab each other in the back, it means more and more and more as the episodes progress and all of these complications and character dynamics pile on top of each other. It's not getting messier. Um, it's getting more brutal. And I think that's my ultimate defense of season 3. I don't think it's messier. I think it's more brutal. I also think it's more daring to be more comedic, more bombastic, and I applaud it for that. Because I don't want the show to ever feel stale, because that would betray Gossip Girl as a concept. And Gossip Girl never does feel stale, and they have to do quite a few daring and outrageous things to keep the show feeling fresh. And they do that a few times in season 3, and every time I was more than happy to accommodate the show's, goals, and I jumped every shark with them, and I'm really proud that I did, you know? I love Gossip Girl. But I think that's where I'm gonna end it. I'm so excited for season 4. Thank you for watching my video. In the comments, what do you think of season 3? Are you a fan of season 3? I love season 3. It's another masterpiece. Um, it's so good. It's so good. I really can't wait. So season 4, huh? All right, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for watching my video. Like the video, by the way. Share it if you know any other Gossip Girl fans. Send them my way. I'd love to get to know more of you. Have a good one. I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we're going to be talking about Gossip Girl season 4. So season 4 of Gossip Girl I thought was incredibly entertaining and pretty well designed. And if you've been keeping track, I I still think it's the best teen drama I've ever seen. Season 4, I don't think it's as perfect or as mesmerizing as the first 3 seasons, but that's because I, I, I think in order for this show to continue, it had to regroup, had to like reform itself. Um, it had to do a few compositionally counterintuitive things to keep the series progressing. And I think that Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, the creators and showrunners of Gossip Girl, I think they pulled it off beautifully. When I say counterintuitive things, I kind of mean that we've been taught a formula by Gossip Girl, because Gossip Girl is a show that's obsessed with the idea of narratives, and more specifically with the meta narrative, with how those narratives are expressed, with its own context. The show insists upon its own expressions, upon its own forms of narrative. And the characters manipulate that narrative, manipulate the meta narrative. They try to game it. They try to use it to further their own ideas of design, for their own lives, for their own interiority, for their own gain. We've been taught a formula by Gossip Girl because narrative always has a formula to it. There's always a structure, and we've been taught the formula of Gossip by from Gossip Girl itself, from the way that the episodes are written, more specifically from the way that the seasons are coordinated. Here, things don't necessarily fall perfectly in line in the formulaic way that we have come to expect them to. There are beginnings, middles, and ends to these arcs, but there's also something that is a little different. And I think that that different or new quality, a lot of people misunderstand for messiness, because I've heard a lot of people criticize Gossip Girl for being a show that started out pretty good and then got messy along the way. No, it didn't get messy. The characters got more complicated. Their dynamic became more sophisticated. You keep laying these betrayals on top of each other. The betrayals mean more and mean different things because it's like a Russian doll of betrayals, a Russian doll of deceit. Gossip Girl didn't get messy. Gossip Girl, remember, is obsessed with the narrative as well as the meta narrative. The characters within the show, they got clingy. They got caught up in their emotions, as they should within a drama, within the narrative itself. The characters themselves got messy. So what we're seeing from Gossip Girl season 4 is where the showrunners are willing to bite the bullet, instances where they aren't. Interestingly, Jenny Humphrey, who was, I think, the MVP of season 3, Jenny and Chuck Bass were the MVPs of season 3, certainly. She does come back, and her final appearance in the season finale of the third season, I thought was a fitting bon voyage. She was simultaneously being exiled from the narrative as well as she was finally escaping it. Like she was being liberated from it because it ruined her. She was the chosen one, and she just became the darkest and most twisted character. And that's what I got from her character. I loved Jenny Humphrey. She does come back in this season for like 3 or 4 episodes. I'm kind of confused about why the marketing insisted on Jenny so much, on Taylor Momsen so much, and I think she's great and cool and stuff. But like she was even involved in the starring role still. Like she still got credit, like opening credits, like throughout the entire season. And she was, like I said, only in maybe 4 or 5 episodes tops. And I did like seeing her, but that's a situation where I feel like Taylor probably wanted to leave the show to focus on her music, and the showrunners were actually trying to write her out of the show as well. But they had a few loose ends to tie up, a few more kind of twists and turns. Another punishment for Serena, committed by Vanessa, Jenny, and newcomer Juliet Sharp, who I thought Juliet Sharp was the best villain in this season. We had quite a few villains in this season, but I think Juliet Sharp was the most interesting one. I'll get into her in a second. Once I get off of this first thought that I'm having, uh, Basically they wrote out Jenny. Jenny's last scene had to be with Blair because Blair and Jenny, their dynamic was always that kind of oppositional one. Um, Maybe there wasn't that kind of like emotional closure as it pertains to the meta narrative through her just saying goodbye to her family, to Dan and Lily and Rufus. I think she had to come back and say goodbye to Blair because we don't actually learn anything new about Jenny when she comes back. She just comes back and is like, hey, I just turned into the same manipulative person that I was. I have to leave again for the same exact reasons almost. But I find it interesting that it was Jenny, Vanessa, and Juliet who were involved in punishing Serena in the first half of the fourth season. Because Vanessa is a character who, unlike Jenny Humphrey, I loved her. Thought she was a great character. Vanessa, I was never completely sold on, and I don't think the show was completely sold on her. Like the narrative itself became sentient and would always reject Vanessa's advances to be incorporated within it. Like the narrative itself lashed out, but she was always an outsider. And the writers and the creators all definitely tried their best to have her gel, have her fit into this world. I mean, they coupled her up with Nate. They had her sleep with Chuck, and like Dan. They tried everything they could. She was Hilary Duff's roommate for first part of season three. They did everything that they could to incorporate her into it, but she never actually fit. She was always the outsider. And in here, they kind of weaponized that quality. Where she is played as the scapegoat for a great amount of the season. She is written into the villain role and she's manipulated into playing the villain for so many other people's power plays. And at the very end, she takes Dan's novel that seems Fitzgerald-esque, seems almost Cocteau-esque, like The Miscreant or something, about his life on the inside, about how probably like thinly veiled satire or social commentary about Serena and Blair and Chuck and Nate and all the people that he's known. That he doesn't want to publish because it would ridicule and humiliate his subjects. Dan's interesting because I mean he's an artist looking in from the outside who was completely absorbed within the elitist sphere, the elitist group, and he's a painter who got too close to his subject, became a part of the art rather than an artist. And Vanessa's talking to him on the phone and is like, "You're so much better than these people," and she gets it published anonymously. Uh, Dan does not want this to happen. That's part of how the season ends. It's one of the cliffhangers. But Vanessa got to a point this season where she completely refused and rejected every single character because every single character, the narrative itself rejected her. And she knew she would never fit in. And my God, she tried so hard. And I thought, now we can get back to Juliet for a second. I thought it was very cool that it was Juliet, Vanessa, and Jenny who were um, conspiring, who enacted a pretty brutal punishment of Serena by playing around with her at a masquerade ball, which is slightly reminiscent of the first season with the masquerade ball where Nate kisses Jenny and believing that it's Serena. Like it's slightly reminiscent of that, but it's that weaponized. It's that kind of like innocent debauchery, if you will, that kind of oxymoron. It does make sense. It's not that contradictory. It's that weaponized. And each person gets to enact a certain amount of revenge, but Juliet takes it too far when she drugs Serena and gets her sent to a mental hospital. Juliet, I thought was really interesting because she is a townie. She is the townie weaponized. So who is the townie in Gossip Girl? Gossip Girl, we have to remember our framework is that our lives are gossip. Our lives are narrative. Narrative is not like natural to the human existence. Our memories are made up of gossip. We remember our lives episodically. Our lives are soap opera. Our lives are melodrama. And our lives are just ongoing. We remember them and we act out our lives uh, with television show motivation, right? We seek out the narratives that we want. And the antagonists of our lives are those whose narratives conflict with our own. So, who is the townie in this? The townie is the unseen damage. Juliet and her brother Ben are the unseen damage. You can look at it hyperpolitically, sure, and it's like the less fortunate being abused by the elite. I think that's just the upper crust, and I think that's barely cutting the surface. Let's go even deeper. We've all got townies, certain kinds of townies in our lives. I mean, hyperpolitical reason reading could also lead to the idea that we are townies too, watching this show and being abused by the situations in it. We've definitely been taken advantage of by the wealthy elite. But I'm not too interested in that. I'm interested in the idea that we all have townies. We all have these people that we have taken advantage of to varying degrees of unreasonable brutality. Like we've all been unreasonable to someone, and we might not even know that we were. We might have no idea. Someone might have been cruel to the townie of our narratives, at the behest of us or like on our behalf, but we had no idea they were doing it. They were doing it to either protect us, to motivate us, or to maybe even possibly harm us in the process. You don't know, but we all have a townie. We all have a Juliet. And I love that her name is Juliet. Juliet, the name itself is archetypal for female lead, for the lead woman. And she's coming in to insert herself into Serena's life with the sole purpose of destroying it by avenging, the unseen damage. Serena's glamorous narrative, like we saw her in season one coming back from boarding school, and it was the reason why she left that boarding school that the damage actually happened, right? Serena's mother wrongfully implicated Ben Donovan, Serena's teacher, uh, accused him of statutory rape, of sleeping with Serena, and even signed an affidavit with Serena's own signature on it, put him in jail for every season that we watched. So now we have to live with a certain kind of audience guilt, right? Because every season that we've enjoyed, this guy has been locked up for it. And since he's the reason why Serena is back in New York, we have also benefited from the punishment of the townie, from the sacrifice of the townie. The townie was sacrificed so that we could enjoy a greater design, a greater narrative. And Juliet is this wonderful avenging kind of archetype. And I loved seeing her. I thought Juliet was a lot more interesting than Ben. When Juliet left, Ben took center stage. And while Ben I thought was entertaining, Juliet was far more like she was actually spellbinding. I was spellbound by her several times. I thought she was really wicked, and I thought she was fascinating. MVP of this season goes to Blair Waldorf. Um, I thought her character was delightful, was wonderfully entertaining. Because she's a character who's always longed for a certain kind of fairy tale, right? And a fairy tale just kind of fell into her lap. I mean, she did some of the steps to get there. It's like all of her careful cultivation finally got her that perfect life, and it's killing her because the life that she loves most is the dreadful, doomed bad romance of Chuck Bass. I think she's figured out that she enjoys creating narratives rather than being swept away by one. But I think she's fascinating. Of course, it ends with her being pregnant, right? Most likely with Chuck's child, so I'm interested to see what goes on there. Chuck had a huge season. Oh my God, Chuck went through a lot. We had the whole Thorpe thing, which is wild. Which is wild. Uncle Jack comes back and actually partners up with Chuck. Crazy shit, but I am here for it. Um, there were a lot of fascinating philosophical impulses with Chuck. We saw the violence within Chuck as he punches a window above Blair's face while he's freaking out because she's picking the prince and not him. And I thought we were going to see another season where Chuck Bass fails. I thought it was going to be even worse than the ending of season three for Chuck. I thought we were going to see the season where Chuck Bass hit rock bottom and then went even further. But no, there's a kind of mature victory to Chuck Bass this time around. Whereas every other season, his character seemed to either deliberately regress into his archetype from the first season, or the pilot. I should remind you, in the pilot, he tried to rape two different women. He was a James Spader type of villain archetype. Josh Schwartz described him as being created to be pure evil. He's obviously transcended that. But each season seemed to end with him kind of regressing back to the archetype from the pilot. Season 3, season 1 for sure ended this way. Him deliberately um either avoiding change or regressing to that villainous archetype out of self-punishment. And I thought we were going to do that again here, right? But here we had that mature victory. So he actually accepts character growth because it's character growth in the form of tragedy. And it's necessary to his development. And I thought that was a really nuanced touch to Chuck. So we don't have to see him deformed and regressed after all this change from the season. I mean, that was fascinatingly done, but you can't see that happen again. And here it didn't. Here, even Nate is like, wow, you're mature. And he actually lets Blair go, and we see actual growth from Charles. We see growth from him. And of course, we also got that that crazy corporate espionage plot with him and his brother and Nate and Raina. Raina, I did like. Raina was a beautiful girl and a pretty cool character actually. Um, the Thorpe thing, I don't think it was saying a whole lot about Chuck's ideations of his father or living inside of his father's shadow. I think that more so what that was doing was challenging Chuck because you saw the trappings of tragedy. You know, like I thought Thorpe was going to win. I didn't think I didn't think that Thorpe was going to um, kill himself and Blair. I thought he was going to win before that. You know, I thought that Chuck was going to lose it all. And I'm happy we didn't take that avenue because it's a more challenging one to have him be a mature Chuck rather than a resentful, loathsome, plotting one. I love both, but I haven't really been around mature Chuck, and I'm interested to see where which philosophical avenues we go down with him there. I think that ultimately the Thorpe thing was a thematic red herring. I mean, it was building narrative on the largest scale. I mean, you can definitely view it as Chuck viewing a narrative created by Thorpe and by his father, and pointing out the design flaws within it and exposing the truth, the morbid truth that's at its source. You know, that Thorpe killed his wife, and his Thorpe's wife was having an affair with Chuck's dad. You know, you can expose that truth. I mean, exposing the truth of narrative, but at the same time, it's inventing your own in the process. And it's not messy. It's just that there are so many threads that it's getting even more complicated to kind of navigate. But I really enjoy that. But ultimately, I think it was a thematic red herring, you know, because that is actually pretty easily dispatched. And that's not where the episode ends. So that's actually not where the episode was most focused, especially with Chuck and Blair's arc, because Chuck and Blair's arc ends with Chuck saying goodbye to Blair and Blair going to the prince with tears in her eyes. That is where the real moment was. You know, um, maybe it was a proving grounds as well. Chuck finally reaching that point of maturity, clearing his father's name and vanquishing the patriarchal challenger to his father's empire. That is all there. That's a thematic red herring. Um, I think we were supposed to see Chuck at his worst because Thorpe was, by investigating Avery Thorpe, Chuck was going down a spiral. And we'd seen that before and we knew it couldn't end well, but this time it did. So it inverted itself in a way that wasn't too sensationalist, in a way that was mature and kind of nuanced too, unexpected for sure. I did like a character it introduced near the very end, Charlie, or at least that's what her name was at first, right? So we find out that her name is Ivy, and she's a con artist, and she just conned everybody, and it was immaculately well done. And my eternal crush, my girl Georgina Sparks, she saw the facade and she really appreciated it. And I think the cliffhanger I'm looking forward to most is her taking out that napkin with Georgina's phone number on it and giving her a call. Thought that was really cool. I like Ivy a lot. I like her voice is cool. You know, it's got an ever so slight rasp to it that I find kind of sexy. And I think her character is really devious and fun. And I think I see in her what Georgina sees in her. Something, an unknown variable, a wrecking ball, something that is dangerous in a world that is now seeming to be pretty well defined and comfortable. Gossip Girl can't let itself be that comfortable. So luckily we have Ivy. I liked Ivy. She was fun. She was very fun, but she's full of philosophical red herrings as you find yourself analyzing is being around these upper crust like elites, these ultra rich, wealthy and chic and beautiful people. Is that literally driving this girl to jump out of a window, driving her actually insane. Like, does she need to be medicated after being around all of these people? She even says to Dan, like when they're like about to have sex, she's like, "Call me Serena," and she's wearing Serena's dress, and she's such an imposter. But that's all a game. It's all a red herring. It's all a wild goose chase, a philosophical one. The writers are playing with us, or Ivy herself is playing with the meta narrative, because at the end, that was all a game, which is really telling me that season five is going to be full of these kinds of booby traps, right? And the booby traps I love to fall into because I'll overthink Ivy, right? I'll overthink Charlie or Ivy, whoever the fuck she is. I will overthink it and then realize that it was all for naught. It was for nothing. And she made a mark of me too. She conned me just like she did everybody else. And I was, fuck, man, staring into the abyss until the abyss fucking giggled at me. Well, that's a Nietzschean fucking nightmare. And that's what Ivy is. And that's ultimately what Georgina is too. Georgina's a postmodern wrecking ball. And I'd be happy to see what Ivy and Georgina get up to. I think it'd be something fun. Dan, I think, is a really fascinating character. Dan is really, really cool. Um, I like the stuff that Vanessa says to him near the end. Like, you wanted to be in that group more than anyone, more than Jenny. And as I said earlier, Dan got too close to his muses, to the subjects of his art. He got too close to the art itself that he incorporated himself within the art and chose existence over observation. He chose the art over the artist. Um, he got too lost within the meta narrative and chose the narrative, like I think that Dan is fascinating because Dan obviously started off as a stand-in, as an analog for the audience. And I think the audience, just like Dan, fell into this universe and we don't want to leave it. And we choose the artificiality over the expose. Because, I mean, even we're smart enough to know that there's no difference, that both have narratives, that both are ultimately superficial, and that both are deliberately designed. I thought Gossip Girl season four was a fascinating season. Um, it's the weakest of the four that I've seen so far, but it's still a masterful season, especially I think in retrospect it'll be very, very good because I think it's setting up where we can go in these seasons five and six. It's setting up where we can go, and it's introducing the viewer, it's introducing me to a new set of symbols, to a new rule book, to a new formula, to several new formulas, formulae, and it's telling me to get used to these and don't trust everything that we show you. We've taught you who to believe, and now we're going to invert that. Now we're going to expand it. Now we're going to forget it. We're going to speak new languages, and you're going to have to keep up. And if you can't keep up, then have fun getting tricked because I got tricked. Like I said, I really like the Ivy character because she tricked me into engaging on an analytical level, even though at the end there was no reason for me to devote that much of my mind to her because she was playing me. So Gossip Girl is saying we have a new rule book, we have a new formula, we have a new structure. Gossip is constantly evolving. Gossip is like fashion. It's one of the most important art forms on the planet, and one of its many qualities um, is the idea that gossip is always adapting and changing. The clothes that we wear, those change over time to reflect the current zeitgeist or the current ethos, right? Well, so does gossip. The gossip changes without anybody really realizing it. And I thought that that was the most effortlessly masterful thing that Gossip Girl season 4 did. It changed its own formula without me realizing that it was doing it until the end, until it was too late. And I went, "You guys got me, Stephanie Savage, Josh Schwartz. You guys tricked me." And that's cool. That's very cool. Very much so. Looking forward to season 5. I really hope you enjoyed my video about the fourth season of Gossip Girl. Yeah, another masterpiece. Great. It was great. We did some really cool aesthetic shit that really worked. The fashion was awesome. Um, yeah, the costume design was always on point. And yeah, but I think what impressed me most was the fact that the formula and the structure of the show that had changed this rhythm, had changed in its totality almost. And I I didn't realize it was happening, which means it was so effortless, it was so nuanced, and it was so designed. It's a beautiful design. And I think in future seasons, I'll realize how vital season 4 was because like I said, it introduced a new set of symbols, and I can't wait to familiarize myself with them. Gossip Girl is still the best teen show I've ever seen. And at this point, four masterful seasons down, I I I don't see it being beaten unless seasons 5 and 6 are literally awful. That's the only way. It's the only way that I could change my mind on that. Because Gossip Girl has not only blown my mind, it's outsmarted me. It intellectually outpaced me. But now I'm ready for you. I'm on to you. Your tricks. But I adore you. I adore you for defeating your cult boyfriend because that's what I want. That's what I want from teen drama, to be defeated by it. And season 4 of Gossip Girl absolutely did that. So, thanks. XOXO. I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we're talking about Gossip Girl season 5. I've been having a ball, having a blast studying Gossip Girl, as I think it's one of the most fascinating pieces of media, works of art that I've ever engaged with. Season 5 does a lot of things, right? I remember in season 4, I did say that we are being introduced to a new set of symbols, a new language. Gossip is changing, just like fashion changes. Gossip changes with it, and we're being taught a new set of rules, a new set of standards, a new organization of symbols and markers, right? Season 5 makes good on teaching me that this new language, because season 5 goes to a lot of pretty wild places that wouldn't have worked if I wasn't right about season 4, and season 4 being this kind of introductory season to a new set of symbols. I'd like to probably open this up by talking about Ivy, Ivy Dickens, who is a really interesting character who I didn't engage with too much in season 4. I found her fascinating, but I thought she was a booby trap, because she tricked me her entire run. I had no idea that she wasn't Charlie Rhodes, and it was a philosophical trick. I would engage with her on certain levels and then have the rug pulled out from underneath me, and Ivy fucking tricked me. But she comes back in season 5, and I'm able to legitimately engage with her. Thought it was fascinating. So let's start our pontificating. Let's start waxing poetic. Let's get lost in our analysis straight away. Our preamble that I've established since season 1, our lives are gossip. We remember our lives episodically. We seek out the narratives that we want to pursue. The antagonists in our lives are simply people whose narratives conflict directly with our own. In a large way, you and everyone you know are actors in an ongoing play, an ongoing soap opera. And sometimes old characters have to take on new power dynamics, and new characters have to dethrone or replace long-standing stars. The truth doesn't necessarily matter objectively. What matters is the performance, because the performance is where the value is derived, because that's where the gossip finds its narrative. Therefore, that's where our lives have meaning. Meaning is not intrinsic to life. Life, if you want to be objective, sure, life has no meaning apart from the narratives that people attach to them. Narrative is gossip. Narrative is not truth. History is gossip. History is narrative. And Gossip Girl plays with the meta narrative, the way that those narratives and the gossip itself is expressed and conveyed. I think Ivy Dickens is a fascinating character within this conceptual framework because she is acting as Serena's cousin, as a Rhodes, as Charlie Rhodes, and she becomes so method, so good at this acting that she loses herself within the role. And the role itself transcends to accommodate even her actual self, Ivy Dickens, within it. She cares for Cece, the grand matriarch of the Rhodes family, and she is there in her final days, final weeks. She's caring for her in a hospice treatment center, and in Cece's will, Cece knew that Ivy was not Charlie. She leaves everything that she has to Ivy Dickens. She knew that it was a performance and valued the performance, because that is life. That is life in the way that we live it. And the more we get to learn about Ivy, your cult boyfriend is currently situated in Florida. I know, I want to swallow a bullet about it like every single day. Ivy Dickens is also from Florida, so I understand the perpetual existential dread that Floridians absolutely possess and demonstrate effortlessly with ease. I understand Ivy Dickens. We learn that she's from a trailer park kind of background, that she's white trash essentially. Um, and she is playing this role of the privileged elite. It's dealing with the idea that life is certainly a society of spectacles, that genuine human behavior, that genuine moments or memories are being replaced by their representation, not even by their reproduction, right? By their representation, by by what we associate with memory, with grand moments, with family. The representation of family has come to replace its actuality. And that's Ivy Dickens for you. She's Guy Debord on methamphetamines. Like she's Gita board on meth, and I love her, especially when Charlie Rhodes, the real Charlie Rhodes, makes herself available. And it falls into a lot of soap opera tropes, which is great because even when it falls into soap opera tropes, Gossip Girl being the project of Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, who both developed the OC, which also played on these soap opera tropes. It is fine to play on soap opera tropes. It's fine to jump the shark. It's fine to have this heightened sense of an augmented reality within a teen drama because everything's exaggerated to begin with, because everything is melodramatic. The framework of it is quite intense and hypersensitive, but also it's playing with the meta narrative. The meta narrative is gossip, is the Gossip Girl blog, which I'll get into in a second. And the meta narrative is acting, is theater. is public theater, which all of these characters participate in, but Ivy does it, I think, in the most deliberately obvious kind of way. And when she starts to hang out with the real Charlie Rhodes, it's the actor and the performer. It's the real deal and her representation. And when they meet and they kind of form a bond over a period of time, like Ivy is cast out, and I still love the actor who portrays Ivy. She has such a sexy voice, and I think that she is. There's a lot of pathos from her performance, especially when she is exiled, when she is banished, when she kind of takes on an antagonistic opposition to Lily, and Lily kind of becomes truly villainous in this season, which I love to see. Kelly Rutherford, you slay me. You're great in this season. But Ivy is quite a fascinating character, but I love Ivy and the real Charlie Rhodes getting to meet and getting to bond and kind of coming to a certain kind of partnership with each other near the end of the fifth season. Because, like I said, it is the genuine article and its representation. And that is so philosophically pure and potent and out of this fucking world that it really blows my mind just thinking about it. Because Ivy has truly become emblematic of the Upper East Side. She's more Charlie Rhodes than Charlie Rhodes, and Charlie Rhodes is more outsider than she is insider. Charlie Rhodes is more Ivy Dickens than Charlie Rhodes is Charlie Rhodes. So at the same time, Ivy Dickens is viewing her representation as well. It's the fact that it's all representation. It's all narrative and how you fall within the narrative, who you're acting for, and what you're acting towards. It's all an act. And the act doesn't make anything disingenuous, especially when everything that is genuine has been replaced by its representation. So something that is genuine, sincerity has been replaced by insincerity. That doesn't mean that everything is now for want of sincerity. No, sincerity is now a non-issue, since insincerity is the watchword. It's simply a nihilistic reading of our ultra modern world, and Gossip Girl does it effortlessly, beautifully. I want to talk about the Gossip Girl blog because I don't know if I've spent too much time on it. I think it's a magnificent piece of art, piece of media, right? The blog itself, the XOXO Gossip Girl, that kind of receives a bit more focus this season, especially when Serena and Georgina, my one and only Georgina, they both gain access to Gossip Girl and run it for a certain amount of time. And of course, Georgina is a psychotic and runs it as a psychopath. But there's a bit more to Georgina. I love her. She, I mean, guys, look at this nun outfit. I'm a Jew. I'm converting immediately. Michelle Trachtenberg's a Jew too. I mean, my God, girl. What am I even saying? I'm just saying that I'm thirsty AF for Georgina Sparks, the nun. I I have found my dream, everybody. But Georgina is magnificent, so obviously a plot device. She convinces Louis, the royal head of Monaco, and husband of Blair Waldorf at the time to dissolve his marriage to Blair off screen. Reminiscent of her retrieving the stolen money back from Poppy in season 2, she conveniently overhears the most immensely important gossip so she can immediately transfer the information in service of the narrative to move the plot forward. That's Georgina's purpose. She is a postmodern wrecking ball. She sees a character being inert, and boom, like he will magically learn some new information, or she'll magically go off screen to solve a problem that is huge that the writers don't feel like solving, so they just say, just have Georgina settle it. It's fine. That's Georgina's purpose, a postmodern wrecking ball, to get these existentially inert, narratively adrift and stagnant or like impossible situations, you know, right? Like the narrative backed itself into a corner, and you bring in Georgina to bulldoze the whole fucking wall and let the narrative just free and to go out there. I've never seen a more eloquent and sexy like she is like if I'm thirsting so much over Georgina, I think that it is extremely revealing and significant that she is symbolic of narrative itself, of the meta narrative itself, and the sexiness, the allure of great drama. That's what she is. She she is so overwhelmingly sensual and erotic and psychotic because that is truly how we like our television, how we like our narratives. And the narratives in our lives, we pursue them so much because they attract us so much because there is a thing about narratives that is sexy. And that's what Georgina is. And when she is running Gossip Girl, she is running it from that psychotic mindset. And I love her so much for it. Philip, her husband, is a low-key king. He made me laugh so much in this season. Like, what a good comic duo Michelle Trachtenberg and the actor who played Philip are. He's so cool. Serena, when she gets access to the Gossip Girl website, it it amplifies the most selfish parts of her, but I think that Serena is maybe the most philosophically astute character in here. I think that naturally one would say either Dan or possibly Chuck are the most philosophically astute or aware characters. No, it's always been Serena, and I've known this ever since the beginning of season 3, where we see her game the meta narrative itself, where she is playing with paparazzi, playing with Gossip Girl, fooling them into broadcasting her whereabouts and her mini scandals and stuff to bring her father out of hiding. I knew then that she understood the merit meta narrative better than any other character. So I think when she's running the Gossip Girl site, it's just revealing or amplifying maybe her nihilism, maybe the fact that she does understand meta narrative so well, and that some of these other people are still um, deluding themselves into thinking that narratives have some sort of sincere core to them. Serena knows the truth. Serena, I think, is an unbelievably complex character, and I think that now we're really starting to explore her. Dan was really interesting as well. He put out a book called Inside, which is in part a love letter to Blair Waldorf and a scathing critique of everyone else in the Upper East Side. And what is it, right? What is it? What are books? What is art? What is all art? Art is the representation of its actual self, right? Every character in the book is a representation of people that he knows. The real thing being replaced by its representation. That's what art does. Art is not a sincere thing. I wish we could just get past this really infantile and naive notion that any art can be sincere. All that art strives to do is represent. That's all it could possibly do. Represent your love, to represent a political belief, to represent a spiritual one, to represent a want, need, desire, or fear. But it's not the fear itself, right? It's not the want or the desire itself. It's its representation. That's what all art does. But what's most philosophically interesting is that it works both ways. Characters read parts of Dan's book or read about themselves on the Gossip Girl blog, and they start to incorporate their representation within themselves. So then your ideation, your actualization, who you actually are, starts to become part and parcel, indistinguishable between its own representation. And that's what's most fascinating about Inside by Daniel Humphrey and Dylan Hunter and all of these different representations within the book itself. Dan and Blair have quite a significant romance this season. I didn't mention it in season 4, but I did love them getting together and watching a lot of great films. This is a film channel after all. I like to think of it as a media channel with an emphasis on teen drama because I like teen drama more than I like anything else. I think it's fascinating. And man, I've already talked about a lot of kind of sophisticated concepts in this video, and I hope you understand why. But just hearing Blair Waldorf say, I'm a huge fan of Tati, let's go see Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, or they're talking about the double life of Veronique and things like that. I thought it was rather cute. I didn't know that it was a romantic involvement that the 5th season was going to pursue wholeheartedly, which it did, which I'm perfectly fine with. Gossip Girl season 4 was about teaching us a new set of symbols, about teaching us about new dynamics from familiar characters. And then season 5 was jumping the shark, following through on several ridiculous, seemingly ridiculous symbols that it introduced in the fourth season. Season 5 follows through on them. Season 5 calls season four's bluff and follows through on every wild thing that season 4 hinted at. The wildest thing that season 5 does is resurrect Bart Bass. Do I think that that's a good decision? I think it's an interesting one. I think it's a gutsy one, right? I do think that it minimizes and demeans um Chuck's interiority, Chuck's progress as a character, for sure, from seasons 2 to 5. I think it does minimize his character growth. But I am kind of just shocked they would even do it. That Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz would even think about resurrecting Bart Bass. I, it's unpredictable. And it it is true not to its original intent, not to its original set of symbols, to its original meta narrative. It's true to the new set of symbols established by season 4, and I am very impressed by its structural quality. Now, I do think it is I wouldn't have done that. Um but if you're keeping score, that's the first misstep I think the show made, and it's not even really a misstep. When Bart Bass died, right? He was replaced by his representation, either viewed as like the shadow or the ghost that kept haunting Chuck and following him through his days and just towering over him, or his representation as literally Bass Industries, the empire. In a way, that completely stays true to Gossip Girl's philosophical kind of energy and frameworks. Art was never even dead because he was constantly ever present, or his representation was, all throughout until season 5. And now Bart is actually back and resurrected, meaning that those representations are now consolidated within one physical body. So there's still a lot of philosophy to Bart Bass being alive. I think that Bart Bass is obviously going to be a plot device, and I hope it's to get Jack and Chuck and Blair on the same page to bring him down in season 6, but I hope more so it's to serve as the impetus, as the driving force behind Lily Kane. Lily Kane. That's Veronica Mars. Holy shit, I'm sorry. Behind Lily Vanderwoodson Humphrey Bass, whatever her fucking name is, becoming like a true antagonistic force. Right? Or I hope there's something I've been missing and Rufus is in on some scheme or something. And like or Bart is in on some scheme. I hope there's something that I'm missing as well, because Gossip Girl is all about sleight of hand. Um, Sometimes fairly, but mostly unfairly. There's no way to see some of this stuff coming, and I love it for it because that's the way that meta narratives work. Nate has a brief affair with not a brief affair, it lasts pretty long, with Elizabeth Hurley, who's in this season, who is pretty sexy and kind of fun. I wish she were a better actor. She's not, but I think that she fits the vibe of Gossip Girl. Her character is a bit grating. But speaking of a character who's always been grating that I've come to deeply appreciate, Desmond Harrington as Jack Bass, really good. Really good. I'm finally understanding his approach to the character. And Jack Bass is, in retrospect, he is this kind of he's almost like Chuck's Georgina, right? Like he's almost like this weird kind of force that comes in that the writers are really able to have a lot of freedom with. And in retrospect, they've done a lot of kind of wild things with Jack Bass, and Desmond Harrington has a pretty fearless portrayal of the character, because he's so viciously unlikable and unremarkable. I like him a lot, actually. MVP of the season might actually be Serena or Ivy. For a little while there, I was thinking Dan was doing the most interesting things, but he got overshadowed pretty quickly. But I mean, his inside book was interesting. It was interesting to see him kind of um be banished in a way for the representation of his friends within the fictional book or whatever. But Serena and Ivy are really fascinating people. Serena, I think what makes her so fascinating is something that goes kind of under the radar, and it's partly due to Blake Lively's like extremely nuanced performance, to be honest. I spent a lot of time talking about Blair Waldorf and Leighton Meester's like understandably like huge and amazing performance every single episode as Blair Waldorf, but she kind of is afforded the opportunity to be a bit more theatrical, right? A bit more melodramatic. Whereas Blake Lively, her approach to Serena and also the writer's approach to Serena is something that's a bit more actually like multifaceted in a way, and nuanced for sure. Because Blake Lively, she approaches Serena with a great deal of understanding. Like I said, I think she is the most self-aware character, at least the most philosophically intelligent when it comes to gossip, how gossip is transferred, how important and vital gossip is to information, to power plays, to personality and history, fashion, art. I think that Serena is fully aware of these things, and I think that Serena has been gaming the meta narrative ever since season 2 and 3. I think she's been gaming that narrative, or possibly even earlier, right? Serena's always understood not only the value of meta narrative, but how to monopolize it and how significant an act's representation is. I mean, at the end of this season, right, she videotapes Dan cheating on Blair with her. And if they had just done the act and not filmed it, that wouldn't have been enough. You need to film it. She didn't post it to Gossip Girl, that was her original intent, but she knows that the only thing that is more important is its representation, right? And what was the act reminiscent of? It was reminiscent of Serena sleeping with Nate way back, even before the pilot episode. We saw it in flashbacks. It was the representation that was representative of Serena's dominance over Blair when it comes to the men in her life that Serena wants instead. Serena knows about representations. That's why she's always on display. Her life is one of display. Her life is gossip. What's foolish about Serena is that she still believes in a sincerity within the spotlight. But I think she's just fooling herself, and I think she will realize that eventually. All in all, the fifth season of Gossip Girl was a very interesting one indeed. Um, they did some really fascinating things here. And yeah, so many interesting concepts were investigated, and we really get to talk a lot about gossip as this philosophy of representations, as the philosophy of the society of the spectacle. We get to talk about the Gossip Girl blog as this truly sentient, truly captivating piece of media, piece of life. It's like a shared God thing, right? It's like the cultural author of the Upper East Side, which is the universe so far as Gossip Girl is concerned. And God is a shared power, right? We all have the ability to affect our narratives, to affect the narratives of our lives. And the narratives of our lives is how the meaning of our lives are derived. It's how we come to them. It's through the narratives that bring us there. And you might not know that you're doing this, but you are. You want a certain kind of meaning for your life, so you pursue that meaning until it becomes real. But even when you get it, you must know that you're not actually at the meaning. You're at the meaning's representation, which, by the way, isn't real. It's better than real. It's gossip. I'll be back to talk about the sixth and final season of Gossip Girl. Yes, this is the best teen drama I've ever covered on this channel. I'm stunned, floored, shocked by how good it is. Till next time, XO, XO. I'm your cult boyfriend, and today is a very special day, Upper East Siders. So we're talking about the sixth and final season of Gossip Girl. I, I, speechless for once in his life. Look at this. Wow. He says in parentheses. I'm stunned. All right. It's a masterpiece. From beginning to end, ultimately perfect, in my opinion. I started off my study of Gossip Girl by saying that if I were asked to design the perfect teen drama, like what I would consider to be perfect within the form, within the genre, it would be Gossip Girl. And it transcended even that. It's more than I could ever imagine. And seeing Gossip Girl come to an end, seeing what Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, seeing that last card up their sleeve, the denouement, ah, it was spectacular. It was spectacular. Most teen dramas that I've covered on this channel, they do affect me, and they can compel me to cry from something mortifying that the show is showing me, right? Um, Gossip Girl, the finale, the series finale made me cry because it was so perfect. I think that everyone who was involved with the show, from the author of the original book series to the showrunners to the cast to the production team to the set designers to the costume designers to the location managers, right? The location scouts, everybody who was involved with this film, network included. Bravo. Bravo. So, what is our preamble with Gossip Girl? Say it with me. Our lives are gossip. Gossip is the narrative of our lives. We pursue the narratives that we want to act out. We remember our lives and experience them episodically in a serialized format. The antagonists of our lives are those with narratives that conflict directly or indirectly with our own. You're no one until someone writes about you. Something that Gossip Girl Season 6 makes abundantly clear. In the final episode, we uncover the identity of Gossip Girl. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I already knew the identity of Gossip Girl because a fucking IRL girl ruined it for me. How do you ruin the final 10 minutes of over 120 episodes? I don't know how you do it, but you get blocked for that kind of behavior. You stupid bitch. I'm still mad about it. Oh my God. But it was fine. It was fine that I knew that. And even hearing the showrunners talk about finally revealing who Gossip Girl was, they even thought that maybe it wasn't even necessary to know. And it's not really a huge plot point necessarily, but it does make Dan Humphrey the MVP of season 6. He was fascinating. Gossip Girl, as I've covered in quite a few different videos, that is the cultural author. You're no one until someone writes about you. Dan Humphrey. I mean, I was entirely right from the very beginning with my study of Gossip Girl. Season 6 ultimately articulated it. Um, I was ultimately completely 100% right on the money with my reading, with my analysis, with my interpretation of the show. Dan Humphrey saw a narrative that he wanted to belong to. Dan Humphrey inserted himself into the narrative that he wanted. He pursued the narrative that he wanted, and he pursued it through creating a blog called Gossip Girl, where he wrote himself into the role of a lifetime, his lifetime, and he played the part beautifully. Penn Badgley does a remarkable job on the show. Um, there's not a whole lot for me to really dive into here because it's literally every one of my analysis videos about how gossip is the narrative of life and how you have to pursue the narratives that you want in life and that everyone does this and that you insert yourself into it and that it's a shared kind of thing where other people can insert their own narratives and manipulate the story to complete an arc that's very important to them. It's just that hyper articulated and made entirely clear for anyone else who wasn't as quick as me, obviously, because I'm so fucking big brained over here. But Dan does do some interesting things before that when he is skewering his friends in Vanity Fair and in The Spectator and going on the offensive with Georgina, queen, queen of my existence and of my life. I Michelle Trachtenberg, take a motherfucking bow. Consistently, you were my favorite parts of the show, you postmodern wrecking ball. Uh, a character whose function was to function as the quintessential plot device. That's why she was so sexy and psychotic, because the plot of Gossip Girl itself is equal parts sexy and psychotic, but also kind of sophisticated in a way that seems kind of provocative. Of course, she's in almost every episode of this final season because the final season has to wrap up a lot of things in a short amount of time, 10 episodes. And Georgina, her function as a character is to speed up stagnant narratives, is to um, snap characters out of existential inertia. And Georgina is helping all the other characters push this narrative to its ultimate climax and conclusion. So of course Georgina has to be a constant presence in the final season because she is, you know, prompting, pressuring Dan to release more scathing materials. Um, but of course she has to be here because, as I've said countless amount of times, she's a postmodern wrecking ball. She is here to move the plot forward. She seems to have a sort of magical, metaphysical ability to do just that. And season 6 had to wrap up a lot of things in a short amount of time. And thank God Georgina was here to keep pushing characters to their ultimate arc, to their conclusions. Thank you, Georgina. Take a fucking bow, Michelle Trachtenberg, because you pulled this off beautifully. Your comedic timing is perfect, and the pleasure from the sadism of your performance was deeply affecting. You were awesome. You are the stylistic center of Gossip Girl. You are at its most nihilistic core, and I find that to be the most interesting one to pursue. Blair and Chuck get married here, and it's phenomenal. I love seeing the conclusion of this couple. Of course, with the 5 years later thing, you even see they have a child. You see that Georgina and Jack Bass end up together, which is something I kind of called in the last season, where I said Jack Bass, now that I think about it, is kind of like Chuck's own Georgina. He's a bit of a postmodern wrecking ball in his own right, and I was right because they end up together, meaning that they mirror each other's function within the plot. They did the same fucking things. It's great. It's really great. Chuck finally defeats his father. His father dies. Chuck lets him fall, which is great. Good on you, Chuck. You're great. I kind of think that if Chuck went to save his father from the ledge of that building, that his father would have tried to pull him overboard instead anyway. So whatever. Um, Part of being a man is probably to know when to put animals out of their misery. And Chuck finally completed his Oedipal journey of watching his father die completely. And his representation is no longer around because I think that was the ultimate kind of punishment of Chuck, right? Because I said that even when his father was dead to begin with in season 2, his representation continued because this is Gita Board is alive and well in Gossip Girl. Real life is being replaced by its representation. And even when Bart died, his representation was still there, meaning like Bass Industries, the ghost that was constantly haunting Chuck, the shadow that Chuck was living within. Bart Bass was still, for all intents and purposes, alive and well as his representation, as his infinite amount of representations. Even Jack Bass can be seen as a representation of Bart Bass. I think that more punishingly, Chuck Bass will always be seen as the ultimate representation of Bart, and that's something that Chuck could never kind of come to terms with because he always felt inferior. It's wild that someone who is so narcissistic could suffer from such a lethal inferiority complex when it comes to his father, and how he knows as a son he's the representation of his father. What we come to in season 6 is complete closure. Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz know that the best series finales are about answering questions and actually obtaining closure. And we get that with Chuck. He no longer sees himself as a representation of his father because he no longer sees his father as something that needs to be represented in the first place. He sees his father for the villain that he is, for the cretin that he is, for the little demon that he was. And Chuck is no longer a representation of his father. His father's shadow no longer towers over him, haunting his every movement, because Chuck is no longer haunted by the specter, by the phantom of a father who doesn't deserve that kind of representation. Chuck is his own man. He is no longer a representation of Chuck Bass. And that's a situation where Gossip Girl does transcend even the most nihilistically impossible readings of postmodernism, meaning it took Gita Board's Society of the Spectacle head on, and it went, yeah, but what if this happened? And good for you, Chuck. You did it. Blair does the same thing kind of, or Blair comes to almost the opposite thing. Like, she is happy to be a representation of the things in life that truly matter, that truly have value, of her mother, of Chuck, of Dorota even, of family, of, um of a true empire, not a fake one. Serena is a marvelous has a marvelous story this time around. It's fun seeing her in the position of being like a young trophy wife or a young trophy girlfriend, right? Almost a fiance. And she has this like 17-year-old almost stepdaughter who thinks that Serena is just the lamest and the sluttiest and the dumbest and just wants to get rid of her. It's interesting to see um, a new generation with a new set of symbols with seemingly like no true loyalty, and no skill for the scheme. We must say they are not good at scheming. They are messy. They are sloppy. They're not as good as our true OG Upper East Siders, but it's interesting seeing how the queen of a previous grand narrative is now seen as antiquated in a way, or at the very least repulsive and unwanted. Serena and Dan have, I think, the most philosophically interesting conversations of the season when Dan's coming to terms with exactly what he's done as the Gossip Girl. What he's done is create a God narrative that everyone participated in. It's both deicide and Genesis. It's kind of incredible in the most nihilistic way possible that leaves a smile on your face that is out of true and pure happiness. There are a lot of cool surprises in the final season. I'm gonna get a noise complaint because I screamed my head off when Kristen Bell herself, who has provided us with a beautiful narration throughout the entire show, she gives us the voiceover. She's the voice of the Gossip Girl, right? And she's there looking at me right in the camera. She even winks at me, at all of us, right? And she's reading the lines there. And Rachel Bilson shows up from the OC playing Blair, which means I was absolutely right about another thing I said, that Blair is kind of you can see that Blair is sort of similar to Summer Roberts from the OC, and makes sense because Josh Schwartz, he's the co-creator and one of the showrunners of Gossip Girl and of the OC, and it made a lot of sense. So I was completely right, but you should have heard me scream, or maybe you're lucky that you didn't, because I'm gonna get in trouble with my neighbors soon. But it was worth it because it caught me completely off guard. It was a beautiful moment that completely paid tribute to the meta narrative that is the audience. That is us. Kristen Bell winked at us, and we were in on the scheme. It's perfect as an entirety, as a whole. I thought every moment of Gossip Girl was a precious one, was a nearly divine one. Um, it is everything I've ever wanted from the teen drama art form, everything I've wanted from postmodern art. It's my favorite thing, honestly. It's crucial to me, to this channel, to what this channel talks about, to what I stand for, to existentialism, to nihilism, to postmodernism, to art. It's fundamental. I love it. And I'm in awe. I'm in awe of its design, of its composition, of its philosophy, and of its characters. Not for one moment did I doubt its genius, did I doubt the mastery of the piece. Because every moment it impressed me. Every moment it mystified me. Gossip Girl, I love you. I love you forever. XO, XO.